Good afternoon. We are reaching to our third session for today. It's entitled Negroponte, a Venetian colony in the East. And the chair is Dr. Nikolos Kontogiannis, director of Dumbarton Oaks Center. And dear Nikolos, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So welcome all to the third session of this day. As Pascal said, this is dedicated to Negroponte, the Venetian colony, and we have quite a program with 4 talks in the first part and 3 in the second. And if I understand correctly, the discussion will be done at the end of the session. So yes, each person has 15 minutes. And may I ask all of you to...
Excuse me, some more time, since my contribution was very short. It was about Epicena in the central chapel of the Church of Agia Paraskevi. I believe that our speakers have more important and things to say, and we have a very fruitful discussion today. So they have more time. Thank you, Nikos.
Okay, let's see how it goes. So we'll start with the first paper by Stavros Mamanoulkos and Nikolos Delnikolas, and the title is The Dominican Monastery Church of Saints Mary and Dominic, the Agia Paraskevi in Chalkis, Negroponte, History and Architecture. And I think Stavros will be speaking on behalf of the speaker of the 2 co-authors.
Thank you very much, Nikos. How can I share my
I think it's
screen?
With the green button at the...
Just a moment, I'll try to do it. Yes, and then...
That's it.
Do you hear
we
me?
see your computer.
Yes, now do you
now
see
we
my...
see your PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you very much.
And you can put it on a slideshow.
Is it okay?
Yes, it is okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So, hello from me too. Our topic is the Dominican Monastery Church of St. Mary and Dominic, Agia Paraskevi in Chalkis, Negroponte, History and Architecture. The Church of Agia Paraskevi in Chalkis is undoubtedly the most important surviving medieval monument of this city and one of the most prominent Latin rule monuments in Greece. Even though there already is it a rather extensive bibliography on the monument, it has nevertheless continued to be the subject of research and interpretation by scholars. The Church of Agia Paraskevi is located in the southern district of Chalkis, still known as Castro, the castle, the fortified, which constituted the fortified part of the medieval and modern city until the late 19th century. In its present state, the monument has the form of a peculiar 3-aisled basilica that consists of 4 distinct parts: the main church, the sanctuary, the belfry, and the belfry staircase. The main church, with internal dimensions approximately 26 by 19 meters, it's a great monument, it's a big monument, has the general form of a typical 3-aisled timber roof basilica with a raised central aisle. The central aisle is covered, the nave, so that the nave is covered with a pointed saddleback roof, while the 2 lateral aisles are covered with slightly inclined lean-to roofs. The 3, sorry, I have to go back, sorry. The 3 aisles are divided by peculiar arcades, each of which is comprised of 2 parts separated by masonry pier. You can see the section and the view of the northern colonnade. The sanctuary is separated from the main church with a tall altar screen. The sanctuary is composed of 3 distinct parts, the central of which nowadays serves as the sanctuary of the Orthodox Church, and the 2 lateral ones as chapels. These 3 spaces are connected to the respective aisles through wide and tall Gothic arches. The lateral arches have bands, scotias, and ribs, while the central one has additionally a rich sculptured decoration along two parallel bands on its front arched facade. Among those decorations, the most striking ones are the depictions of two Dominican monks, which have been identified in 2004 by Vasiliki Vemi and Nikos Dellynikolas, namely that of the founder of the order, Saint Dominic, and one of its primary saints, Saint Peter the Martyr. You can see here the details in my picture. The central part of the sanctuary is covered with a recent modern timber-framed cross vault, while the two lateral parts, the chapels, are covered with ribbed stone cross vaults. You can see here details of the two cross vaults of the chapels. The belfry of the church rises over the north chapel in the form of a 14-meter tall tower. The northeast corner of the church houses the staircase that leads up to the first floor of the belfry. You can see both the belfry and the staircase in the corner of the church. On the exterior, the church appears much like a rather heavy edifice, despite its slender proportions. The facades are simple, flat, and unadorned, decorated only by the door and window openings and the roof eaves. At its present state, the monument allows us to make certain observations concerning its construction. The north wall of the main church, its south wall, and part of the east wall of the sanctuary, here we are, as well as largely the lateral walls of the central of the nave, resting on the arcades, and the greater part of the lateral wall of the central sanctuary space are constructed of stone masonry consisting of rubble and half-chiseled limestones and bricks, and built with a rather weak lime mortar. The parts of the walls between the arches of the lower arcade are constructed with a carefully built masonry in a row cloisonné style. It's a Byzantine style masonry in this between the arches of the lower part of the colonnades. The south wall and part of the sanctuary walls are built of rubble masonry, often reinforced, as in the case of the south wall, with timber ties. You can see here the section of the looking towards the south in the south aisle. Both the structural arches and the arcade arches, as well as the arch lintels and the door and window frames, are constructed of well-chiseled porous stone voussoirs. The roof of the central aisle is of typical late medieval Venetian construction. Panagiotis Touliatos and Nikos Dellynikolas will discuss its details further shortly. The form of the load-bearing structure of the lateral aisle roofs can be partly reconstructed with some certainty based on the surviving traces of their main elements. The study of the construction history of the Church of Agia Paraskevi is primarily based on careful scrutiny of the church itself, the study of its old depictions. Here we have an old photo of the mid-19th century, and a few inscriptions that have been preserved on the building, as well as other evidence from various historical sources. The issue of the dating of the church has occupied scholars for a long time. Despite the fact that certain other opinions have been voiced in the past, the widely accepted view by older scholars was that the church is an early Christian basilica that was repaired in mid-Byzantine times and by the Latins. However, a concerted examination of the monument itself and evidence from historical sources on medieval Negroponte lead to the notion that the church was actually constructed from the ground up as the church of the Dominican monastery in the third quarter of the 13th century, and certainly after the year 1253, when Saint Peter the Martyr was ordained. Vasiliki Vemi and Nikos Dellynikolas have nevertheless since 2004 proposed that it was a church built to also serve the Venetian community of Chalkis, and after 2061 the Latin Patriarch, and that its form is typically Venetian and not strictly Dominican. They have also posited that the church is mentioned in the chronicle of the fall of the city to the Turks in 1470, in conjunction with the square and loggia, the so-called the House of Bilo to the west of the church, still standing and very well restored by the archaeological surveys recently. Upon careful examination, the building appears to have undergone several interventions and modifications during the first centuries of its life, some of which may also be attributed to changes in its design during construction. The grave of Petros Lipomano was built in the north wall of the North Chapel in 1398. The wall paintings that adorn this space must also be dated to this period or a little bit later in the early 15th century. It is not particularly difficult to reconstruct the overall form of the Church of Agia Paraskevi around the end of its first historical period, namely after the mid-15th century, that is before the fall of the city to the Turks, to the Ottomans. Even though some individual crucial issues in terms of its reconstruction still remain unanswered. The main difference between the overall form of the first phase of the monument compared to the form it has today is that the medieval building extended significantly further to the west. Moreover, there was a portico covered with a timber lean-to roof in front of the main of the nave to the church of the church to the west. One of the most important issues concerning the reconstruction of the original form of the church is the covering of the sanctuary, which probably had the form of a cross. Here you can see the modern structure, timber frame. So the covering probably had the form of a cross vault, as in the case of the churches of St. Paul and Dominic, San Paolo and Domenico. Sorry. Let's stay here. In the so-called Arab Jami in Galata, in Istanbul, and the Church of San Salvador in Candia, modern day Iraklio on the one hand, and Church as St. Peter of the Dominicans in Candia and St. Sophia in Andravida, you can see here on the other. Before the interior of the sanctuary was covered with render in 1975, parts of 3 out of total of 4 corbels were still visible high on the walls, while the top of the north blind arch is still preserved in the interior of the modern roof. A third issue is the existence or not of galleries at the west end of the 2 lateral aisles. The layout of the colonnades indicates that such galleries indeed existed, and this also explains the existence of 2 rows of windows in the wall, in the southern and northern wall of the building. Still, this issue must remain open, awaiting further evidence. Similarly, various issues relating to the reconstruction of individual elements of the church, which may be linked to some add-on buildings that have since been destroyed, must remain also open, waiting for excavations. The north wall, and primarily the arcosolia that were incorporated into the north facade of the church, indicate that the monastic complex extended towards this side, with its buildings arranged around the claustro, in the center of which stood the well, which is depicted in all drawings. Here we have a drawing of Hansen, the architect of classicism, and you can see the well in the middle of the old claustro. In his time, this used to be a square. In terms of the functional arrangement, and thus the reconstruction of the secondary architectural elements of the basic furnishing of the church, we must rely on the synthesis of evidence that the building itself provides with the data provided by sources on the functional arrangement of the early churches of the Dominican order. According to such a synthesis, we can safely assume that the eastern part of the main church, with the 2 large arcade openings, Ample lighting provided by the windows of the lateral walls, and the north door, which also allowed direct access to the exterior, was the part of the church reserved only for the monks, the so-called Ecclesia Fratrum or Ecclesia Superior, while the larger western part was meant for the commoners that the monks preached to, namely the so-called Ecclesia Fidelium or Ecclesia Inferior. Those two parts were separated by a possibly wooden partition, which was called intermedium or tramezzo. Here we have a remnant of this tramezzo, which since the early years of 20th century has been, unfortunately, has been destroyed. The present day sanctuary of the church was the Capella Major of the medieval church, while the two present day chapels used to be chapels as well, independent chapels connected to the lateral aisles. In 1470, probably after the capture of the city by Mehmed II the Conqueror, the church was converted to an Islamic mosque, and we currently have almost no data on the history of the long history of the building during its existence as an Islamic mosque, apart from a short passage by the Vliad Zelepi, who visited Eghriboz, the Ottoman Khalqis, in 1667. Close examination of the building indicates that it definitely underwent at least one major repair during the period of Ottoman rule, possibly in the year 1726. Following the integration of Khalqis into the newly founded Kingdom of Greece in 1830, the medieval church was taken back from the Turks and converted to an Orthodox church dedicated to Agia Paraskevi. Despite the lack of relevant testimonies, the interventions that were undoubtedly carried out to the monument to convert it into a church must have been minimal. The well-known 1840 city plan of the Castron of Khalqis and three older drawings depict the building in the form it had during the first years after the Greek War of Independence. The Church of Agia Paraskevi suffered heavily damage from the September 17th, 1853 earthquake. According to sources, the earthquake caused the collapse of the whole western part of the church, and in the following years, the church was repaired, and according to sources, its length was shortened by about 7 meters. The overall form of the church after the 1850s repairs is known to us from old photographs of the city of Khalqis from this era. The marble templo and the marble floor of the church was constructed in 1888. In the 1890s, the Church of Agia Paraskevi suffered damage from two earthquakes, that of Thiva in 1893 and that of Lokris in 1894. The destruction of the medieval belfry of the church, which up to that time was preserved intact, unfortunately, must be attributed to those two earthquakes. The interventions that followed the 1890s damage included the rearrangement of the main facade of the church with the introduction of classicist elements, the construction of some neo-Gothic windows, and the erections of rudimentary timber belfry. We saw it before, on top of the ruins of the original medieval belfry. During the years 1927 and 28, the upper part of the belfry that was damaged by the earthquakes, as I told you before, was rebuilt unfortunately, without following its original form as depicted in all photographs. The rearrangement of the west facade of the church must also date to this period. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Archaeological Service carried out some works that made use of cement mortars. These interventions were fortunately interrupted in 1980 by Nikos Delinikolas in an attempt to salvage the original pointing of the 13th century, which was covered with render. The first F48 of Byzantine antiquities carried out the restoration of the roofs and the consolidation of the belfry in the period 1998 and 2001, and added temporary reinforcement ties in the period 2004 up to 2009, in collaboration with the Directorate for Technical Research on Restoration of the Hellenic Ministry of Culture, the National Technical University of Athens, the Politecnico di Torino, and the Archaeological Service of Venice. Lastly, and I finish, following an assignment by the Council of the Church of Agia Paraskevi, specialized restoration offices, working together with the authors, as well as with Androniki Miltiadou, civil engineer, PhD, as consultants, prepared the restoration and consolidation design project, according to which the restoration of the monument is currently underway, and we wait for the results of the research carried out during this restoration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stavros, for this wonderful overview of the history of this monument. And we are passing to the second speaker for this afternoon, and it is a joint paper by Nikolas Dilinkolas, Panagiotis Touliatos, Androniki Miltiadou, and Eleftheria Tsakanika, with the title Decoration and Construction Analysis of the Trusses of Agia Paraskevi, Chalkida. And I think Nikos is going to speak on behalf of the authors. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. But I think that someone other is sharing, and it's impossible for me to.
Is it?
You must, yes, get out.
You need to unshare.
How to do this?
Again from
the green button, but where is the green button? The green button, I can
on
find
the
it.
lower part of your
Sorry.
screen,
I'm trying to find it.
Sorry, let me see. No.
It happened here and I can't find it. Share. Stop share. So, is it okay now?
I'll try.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry for the problem. Okay.
Is it well? Everybody can see it.
Yes.
Nikos?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
You can hear me well.
Lovely. Go
Very
on.
well. Good evening and thank you. In order to economize your time, we will show you fastly some pictures Professor Touliatos had prepared that explain the mode of construction of the triangular trusses you already have seen. You may easily find a particular article, although the best way of research is the one dear friend Panagiotis Touliatos gives the paradigm in the photograph. The personnel of the first ephorate of Byzantine antiquities had the responsibility for the restoration of the trusses and the organization of the work site. Geometric elements of the triangular truss, the standard load-bearing roof component. Compositional detail of the typical triangular truss. We see earlier reinforcements with iron elements due to cracking of the stone support cantilever soon after the earthquake of 1894. The red arrows point to the decorated wooden element that fills the gap between the wooden cantilever and the stone, and also the two wooden reinforcements inside the wall. Typical composition and support detail of the triangular wooden truss. Please pay attention to the sketch on the right, showing the joint between the horizontal tie beam and the oblique beam or rafter. The triangular trusses were not lifted as a whole, but the three members were transported and put to their final position separately. On the ground, the horizontal member, the tie beam, is placed on top of the corbels and connected to them by nailing. Then the tie beam with the corbels is raised and secured on the wall. Finally, the oblique members, the rafters, are lifted and assembled. Artificial dents and holes may explain the way of transportation and lifting of the trusses. The same details, dents and holes. Again, magnificent sketches of Touliatos. Some of the holes should have been opened before the squaring of the tree trunk. The sketch to the right. And after this, we will continue with description of corbels, of the painting of the corbels or barbacani. Claudio Menichelli proposed that the triangular trusses are an indication that the architects of the Venetian Basilica of Negroponte had initially designed a roof similar to San Giacomo d'Alorio, following the type of carena di nave, ship's hull. This is why they painted only the barbacani. Perhaps the absence of large windows evoked this decision not to construct the carena di nave. The painted decoration of the corbels consists of winged dragons and hybrid animals or chimeras, as we are going to see later on, in a stylized vegetal or geometric background. Only two types of blazons or shields decorate the barbacani. The same type of shields is painted on each corbel, at the sides, to the curved front, and underneath. The Lion of Venice, the symbol of the evangelist, Saint Mark, is of the older time, particularly schematic, holding a closed evangel. The lions are represented as busts emerging from the water. This type was common in stamps and is called in moleca. In the Venetian dialect, moleca means crab. In the permanent exhibition of the fortress of Carababa, a collection of 11 lions of Venice are exhibited, 3 of them belonging to the older type, very rare indeed. 17 trusses are preserved in the central aisle, made of larch wood from the Alps. Initially, there were 21. The corbels share an equal number of shields, revealing that the church was not exclusively either of the Venetians or the Dominicans or the exiled Latin patriarch or the bishop. The basilica is the result of their cooperation and alliance after the recovery of Constantinople by the Byzantine Emperor Michael Palaiologos at 1261. Some of the trusses have corbels with identical shields at the ends. Most of the trusses have both shields, but the result is equal: 17 lions of Venice, 17 seals of the bishop or Latin patriarch. And this basilica remains the main church in the center of the Venetian region of Negroponte, at the opposite side of the square of Weiler's house, with the loggia that is described in the chronicles of the siege and sack of Negroponte by the Ottomans, because there the Vailo Messer Pollo Erizo managed to arrest and execute the traitor Tommaso Schiavo. I insist to this theory. The style is very austere and simple. The line of the design is fast and sure, with black or white or red color upon a red or yellow ochre background, an indication of earliness. We recognize the classical tetrachromacy or tetrachromy, black, white, red ochre, yellow ochre, used directly on the surface of the wood. The geometrical and floral decoration, triangle friezes, meanders, and interlaced braids can be recognized in the earlier ceilings that Lucas Capin have recently published. Here, the publication of Capin. Some of the early decorations of Venetian ceilings. There exist many of later time. The proportions of the ingredients, the relative amount of color and medium, differs significantly because of the fastness of the work, either the different painters. Let's admire some of the hybrids or chimeras. Birds with dragon bodies. And another one. A duck-headed creature resembling to ornithorynx or platypus that was unknown it really existed in Australia. And a human-faced dragon. But the dragon-faced dragon is the preferable kind of the bestiary of Negroponte. The variety of the hybrids is significant and can be easily compared with the beautiful, humoristic, and imaginative creatures that decorate the margins in the manuscripts of 13th and 14th centuries and later on. We can now enjoy and admire. During the recent years, a great number of the illuminated manuscripts that have survived the wars and destructions have been digitized and offered to the common and the curious or peculiar internet visitors. From a stylistic point of view, the hybrids of Negroponte are of an early form and are not demonic symbols, but rather glorify the creation of God, a central theological and philosophical concept of the Gothic period, originating from the Psalms and the philosophy of Empedocles that is outlined by Aristotle, and is considered the earliest form of Darwinism. The collection of Karababa Museum includes many very interesting reliefs of symbolic animal representation of Middle Byzantine times. They were published by Helen Konopiotou Manolescu. The fighter archaeologist Lela Manolescu made heroic efforts for the safeguarding of the monuments as director of the first ephorate of Byzantine antiquities, and also for the protection of Agia Paraskevi and every architectural detail of its basilica, even the mortars of Venetian period. It is a pity that in Venice, only geometrical ceiling decoration of the 13th or 14th century survived. But we must be sure that similar to these beautiful ceilings of the southern coast of France and Spain had existed also in veins. The Barbacani of Negroponte, or Chalkis, is a proof of this assertion. One of the hybrids of the Barbacani is in the form of an onocentaur. Another onocentaur is in the sculptured great arch of the main aisle, body of donkey, a human head, and a Scythian cap. With a tortured expression, it does not symbolize a demonized Jew, but the double nature of human creatures after the fall of Adam and Eve. St. Paul says exactly something that we should believe that expresses this very beautiful sculpture. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me for the body of this death? This creature is present in the bestiaries and in the marginal decoration of manuscripts. The onocentaur is presented also in Hebrew Pentateuchs. It does not depict a Jew, of course. A panther is near the onocentaur, symbolizing Christ, thanks to the 3-day sleep that the bestiaries describe about this animal, and its perfumed breath when it wakes up that attracts the animals or the sinners. It is not a symbol of devil here. 20 years ago, when with Billy Vemy, poet and professor of archaeology and museum pedagogy, were trying to identify the two monks at the springs of the Great Arch, it was Father Rosarius Cognamiglio that gave us the certainty that we have in front of us two Dominican saints, Saint Dominic and Saint Peter Martyr, Saint Peter of Verona. Padre Rosario, who lived many years in the center of Athens, was sure that this subtle sculpture is Saint Catherine, a revered saint by the Dominican order also. Another identification we will propose now that can be very useful as the terminus postquem for the Parisian sculpture that we considered of the second half of the 13th century and after the year 1261. A king is included between the busts that are sculptured at the inner pointed arch with a maple tree foliage and flying seeds. The external half of the arch is decorated only with foliage and grapes of gooseberry, both symbols of the pathos of Christ. We think it is Saint Louis IX, King of France and patron of the arts. Its canonization in 1297 fits very well with the dendrochronological estimations and the style of sculpture and painting of the basilica. The characteristics of hair and the round, broad face are identical to both stone and wooden sculptures of the same period. Of course, not only the central arch, but also the corbels of the South Chapel and parts of the North Chapel were created and transported from Paris. As all the details reveal, they were not created in situ. Their styles seem more conservative because the foliage does not hide totally the geometrical form of the tectonic members. But this was necessary since they should be transported without any damage. They seem older, but the necessity of transportage maybe created this more conservative form. The best proof of this concerning the Great Arch is that although the master mason increased the width of the eastern end of the aisle from 8.40 to 8.57, he was obliged to cover a part of the foliage to the left, see the arrow, when he finished the construction of the east end of the arcades. Two separate dendrochronological surveys gave the following results. Peter Kuniholm and Kurt Nicolucci, who had a long Alpine large chronology, finally could match the Agia Paraskevi timbers at 1223, with an unknown number of rings missing on the exterior of each of the four samples. Kuniholm came to the conclusion that a missing 2 or 3 or 4 centimeters of wood lost during the process of squaring the timbers would add some 40, 60, 80 years to the end dates of 1223, even 105 years. Olivia Pignatelli came to the conclusion that the year 1288 can be considered the terminus ante quem non for the wooden elements. So it is possible to identify the year 1306 as terminus ante quem non, is her expression, for the felling year of the matrix plans. Both the dendrochronologists said that finally the historians should decide. We must keep in mind that the eastern part with the rib vaults and the Gothic sculpture is possible to have finished many years before the transportation of the roof. For the protection of the great arch, a provisional cover should have been constructed, as is the case with the west part of the Cathedral of Amiens. Both the wooden roof and the Gothic-style sculpture have been transported from the Western Europe at a very good moment for the Gothic and Italian art. It is a miracle that those beautiful works of art still exist in Greece, the country of the magnificent ruins. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nikos, for this amazing account of an exquisite roof, so nicely preserved and studied. And we are passing to Alexandra Costarelli. If you can share your view. Yes, and we can pass to Alexandra Costarelli with her paper, A Medieval Statue Unearthed Near the Church of Agia Paraskevi in Chalkis, Euboea. Alexandra? I don't see you. Yes, here you are. Alexandra, can you hear us? I can see you on the screen. I don't know if you are there.
She is present, Nikos, but she needs to.
know.
Yes.
But perhaps you can go on. If she doesn't respond, then you are the next paper. So you can go on now. And then
I will not deliver the paper. So you must go on further. Because it is a short contribution about sculpture. So I prefer not to deliver the paper in order to have more time for the interesting things.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Alexandra, if she's not there, Paschalis, if you're not going, then we'll go on with the next paper. We have a break in the program.
We have a message from Alexandra. Please help me, something like this in the chat.
Yes. Sorry.
Need help with the.
Help me with
the power presentation, probably.
Okay, the camera and the audio. I'm not really sure what to do, Paschalis.
The camera and the audio. Please open your camera and unmute yourself.
It's the bottom left
Left hand.
in your screen. Not really sure what to do now.
We can proceed to the bylaw house if you want, and then have a break.
I don't know if Eleftheria, are you here? Sakanika or George?
George is here.
Yes. Would you? Hi, George.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
I
Would
will be
you like-
presenting because Eleftheria is in Japan and she kindly asked me to present.
Lovely. So,
Yes, wait
can
a
you
minute.
just share your screen?
Yes, wait a minute. Mhm.
Great.
So, good afternoon. I'm Yorgos Kourmadas. I'm an architect. I was a supervising architect of a restoration project carried out at the so-called bylaw building. It's a conventional name for a building in the center of Chalkida. Okay, it was constructed, the part for which I will be talking to you was constructed in the during the Latin domination of Negroponte, but before it was subjected directly to the rule of Venice, because we have dated it with the enterochronological dating at the beginning of the 14th century, sorry, yes.
Yorgo, unfortunately, we're not seeing the full screen.
You're not?
No,
What
we're
am I
seeing
doing?
your view.
Sorry for that. What should I be doing?
Full view.
Again, this.
You cannot be seeing your notes.
Yeah, wait, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Let me stop the sharing and I will get back to you. So, you. Okay, I think I have it.
And now full view.
Yes. Again the same. Oh, how did that? Oof, sorry. Sorry. No notes. How do I switch the notes off? I don't even want them. Maybe now.
Let's see.
No, sorry for that.
It's all right. We'll see it with the notes then.
Yes, okay,
That's the best
sorry.
thing you can do. So go on.
Okay, so like you know, there are a lot of monuments from the Latin domination in the island of Evia, but most
Share
of
the
them.
screen.
I didn't. Yes, okay, so we have a lot of ecclesiastical monuments, a lot of churches, and a lot of military architecture. But the bylaw building is the only that we know of secular building that survives. It is located, like you see in this old photograph, next to the Church of Agia Paraskevi within the city walls. Like Nikos Delinikolas had observed, the northern wall of the Venetian wing of this building is aligned with the southern wall of Agia Paraskevi. And we know from excavations that it is a building that was extending to the north and to the west. We have some remains of walls, but only we don't know until where it extended. So this is a photograph prior to the conservation project. And you can see on the left-hand side is the Venetian wing. I'll call it Venetian because it's easier. And to the right-hand side is an Ottoman extension that was done in the 18th century. It was, yes. And so in the section you see, again to the left-hand side, the Venetian wing of this building. Here within the dashed rectangle, again, I have marked the Venetian wing as it is seen from the east. Its relation to Agia Paraskevi and the building seen from the west, with some modern constructions, the ones in brickwork here. This is all before the restoration, but entering the building, one sees some Gothic arches. And to the left, you see this loggia with these Gothic arches, and in the back, you can see a large hall, but I don't know if you can notice there was a floor there that is missing, and we can see the sawn off remains of the beams and corbels embedded in the masonry. The arches to the right of the loggia are Ottoman constructions that imitate this Gothic morphology. Okay, looking at this facade, that in reality is the northern facade of the Venetian, of the surviving part, and correlating it to the first floor construction joints, because these openings in the first floor are smaller today, but we can distinctively see these original openings. One hypothesis was that on the first floor there was a mullioned window, and this is a very fantastical reconstruction I did of the complex in the medieval times, with an open loggia in the ground floor and a council hall in the first floor. And you can see that to the right, the building extended. We have this large seal of a large door, but we don't know much more about it. This is again a reconstruction in the Ottoman times. We know, Professor Mamaloukos pointed out to me that there was, based on the timber remains, a bay window looking towards the street, overlooking the street. And in the 19th century, the building was renovated in the neoclassical style. Again, in the dashed line is the part of it that dates to medieval times. What was this building? Looking for parallel examples, we found many public loggia buildings in Venetian ruled cities, from northern Italy to the Dalmatian coast. Okay, some of them are later constructions of the Renaissance, but we also have some medieval ones, like the one in Treviso to the bottom left. And these two really look like what the Bailo building could have been. The top one is in Spalato, in Split, in Croatia. The bottom one is in Bergamo, that was also for several centuries a Venetian city. And we have examples from Greece. Most of them, again, are from the Renaissance, like from Crete or Corfu. And we have also from Rhodes this merchant's loggia. Yes, so this is what we imagine it could have been like. Going back to the building before the conservation project, we can see that there is a first floor that is missing, but there are a few remains of it. And then there is a full set of beams and corbels at the second floor level on the top. This is the second floor as it is. Yes, as it was, sorry. And this is an overall like axonometric of the building. Again, to the left is the Venetian wing, and this modern roof to protect it was constructed by the Ministry of Culture and the architect Nikos Deli-Nicolas in the 90s to protect the timber remains. So it lies just over the second floor I showed you before. The project was very comprehensive to restore this building and make it a public building for exhibitions, for a cultural venue, and also a place that you can visit also when there is not something going on, like a museum. And here we have a section of the Venetian wing. We could find by examining the building that in 5 levels there were tie beams, timber tie beams, encircling it. And 2 of these correspond to the floors. So there were within the stone masonry large cross sections of oak timbers that help the building be more resistant in earthquakes. It's an anti-seismic system employed throughout Greece and this part of the world. And in the case of the floors, it's also the beams that upon which the floor beams are resting. So we have again the first floor and the second floor and the corresponding underlying timber ties within the masonry. Here are 2 plans of the remains of the timbers of the floors. To the left is the first floor. You can see we only had 2 surviving beams in situ, and we knew the positions of the rest of the beams because the remains were still embedded in the masonry to the left. It's the southern wall. And on the top floor, we have the full set of beams and corbels. Let's go back to the first floor. That is also the topic of this announcement. So you see the sawn beams, and underneath them the corbels, and in between also there is a tie beam running, and to the left 1 of the extant beams in situ. This is it on the top floor, and the second beam was hidden within a masonry wall that, according to the project, had to be dismantled, and we found it as we took it away, along with its corresponding corbel. It's on the photos to in the bottom. This is a section of this configuration. So you have 1 corbel resting on 2 tie beams, out of which the front one is molded as a cornice. Over the corbel is another tie beam, and over it the floor beam. We had to examine thoroughly these few remains to understand what this was and how it was constructed originally. There were very few indications, and at the beginning they didn't make any sense to me. Eleftheria Katsakanika, who is much more experienced in this, had joined this project, and she helped us analyze together all the remains, all the nails, all the little planks, and like this recesses like this one I have pointed out here. And things started somehow to make sense. There was these groove joints on the sides of the beams and of the corbels. But okay, also some nails indicating that there were some missing timbers that we had to think what they were, because you see a nail on under the corbel and from the beam going down, but there is something missing there. And yes, so Eleftheria was very thorough. These are her photos in documenting all this. And it's very interesting that the beams and the corbels do not touch. There is this gap corresponding to the tie beam running in between them. And this was a thing that baffled us and also previous people who had studied the subject. Yes, so here you can see this, the only extant part of the cornice that is like, it's, as I told you, the tie beam under the corbel. And here you can see this, again, the grooves, the groove going to the cornice, and this nail obliquely nailed on the corbel. It's called in Italian alla traditora, this system, this, yes. Okay, I will not tire you more with these photos. Okay, we had to obviously to do some studying, and because we knew from also from Nikos Delinicolas, who had shown me this photograph he took at the Palazzo Ducale in Venice. We were looking for the floors of the Palazzo Ducale, and in general, we found a bibliography about Venetian floors and the timber constructions. And we recognized finally the elements we had been trying to understand all this time. And so these grooves were meant to receive these obliquely placed planks that they are called in Italian petenelle, and they were at some in some buildings they were also painted. In between, over the corbel, we recognize these little planks as the remains of timber strips that are called in Italian cantinelle, and they were used to hide from underneath the joints of the boarding of the floor. In this case, it's not in the boarding of the floor, but like you can see in the reconstruction to the left, there was a second level of covered ceiling for decorative purposes between the corbels and underneath the actual floor. Again, from the Delinicolas photo, there was this braided element everywhere, and we saw it also in other monuments, like a cornice, like a spiral braid. We didn't have this. We had not found it anywhere, because in our case, we had this molding under the corbel. So we thought in its position, there should be a molding, and this is how the reconstruction was supposed to happen. But then during demolition works in the Ottoman wing, we found this more rudimentary kind of spiral, but also its dimensions were matching what we have to place there between the corbels and the beams. And so we thought we had solved the puzzle, and we knew the original form of the floor. So this is the position of this braid. And okay, we reconstructed it for the remainder because we only had like 1.5 meters. Oh, okay, now let's go a little on the top floor. There we have as you see, the beams and the corbels are in contact. And Nikos Delinicolas had pointed out to me that there were these small recesses, cutouts on the upper surface of the beams. Okay, this is a drawing by Lucas Capin and Claudio Menichelli that shows type A is an earlier type of this kind of floor where the cantinelle, the timber strips, are nailed onto the beams and the boarding planks onto the cantinelle. In the case of B, it is like the second floor we have, where the cantinelle are inserted into these cutouts that take part of the cross-section of the beam. But in this way, the boards are nailed directly onto the beam surface. So in our case, we had both of them. And we knew the floor number, our first floor was like type A, and our second floor like type B. According to Menikeli and Skapin, these two methods, A is earlier and B is later, but they overlap. So in our case, they were contemporaneous because the chronology proved that these floors were built at the same time. And then we had to find the way to reconstruct it because it's like a 3D puzzle. And we had to start by making openings in the walls, craning in the corbels, reconnecting the tie beams with new parts where they were missing, and with the corbels, and then okay, here you see the same procedure, like some corbels in place, new tie beam underneath in place, etc. Then we decided to also add this timber block over the corbels so that it is in contact with the beams so that the loads are transported more safely, because otherwise only the front part to the left, this timber would be in contact with the beam. And this is an invisible alteration we did to the original construction detailing.
Yorgo, are you bringing it to the end?
Yes, I'm like 1 minute. Okay, just in snapshots, you can see how the beams were placed in place and leveled, and then the cantinelle were placed over the beams, and slowly also the boarding that we also we used tongue and groove planks, not simple ones, to make the floor more rigid. And this is how it looked from underneath, with the original corbel and the cornices in place that are darker. And when it was finished, and then we had to like paint it over with some wax that had also some pigment to make it more palatable, let's say. So this is it, I think, from me. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yorgos. If you
Thank
can
you.
share your screen. All right. And
Yes.
I think we will have 5 minutes of a break. It's 6:05 in Venice, so we can start again at 6:10 according and be on the program. And if Alexandra can join us, then she will be the first one. Otherwise, I will ask Andrew to take the step.
Nikos, so we can make a try with Alexandra. She can stay with us and try
Okay.
to.
Great. So
Stavros Mamaloukos is in another congress. So Nikos Delinikolas can answer to questions regarding his paper.
but we have the questions at the end.
Okay. He'll be absent, I believe. Yes. Okay. He just informed me to tell you this. Okay.
What is the, so we have 5 minutes of a break just to be able to check with Alexandra her PowerPoint, and then we start.
Okay, fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alexandra, can you try to share? Let's see if it works. Can you hear me, Alexandra? Alexandra, can you try to unmute yourself if it works? Or share your PowerPoint.
Can you listen to me?
I can hear something.
Okay.
Can you share also the screen?
Okay.
We see only your computer.
Can you listen to me?
We don't see the screen of the PowerPoint. You have shared.
Πρέπει να το μεταφέρουμε στην επιφάνεια εργασίας, Νίκο, για να ανοίξει. Από εκεί θα προβληθεί, όχι από το φλασάκι.
Can you listen to me?
Ναι, Αλεξάνδρα, πρέπει να το βάλεις στην επιφάνεια εργασία σου, όχι στο φλασάκι. Δεν θα ανοίξει το φλασάκι.
Ναι, okay.
And now share your screen. The screen with the PowerPoint.
Is it shared now?
Yes, 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 we can see it. Put it on full view from the bottom right. Full view or yes, προβολή παρουσίασης κάνε. Είναι το κουμπάκι. Είναι το κουμπάκι το ένα από τα τρία. Πιο αριστερά, κάτω δεξιά. Κάτω δεξιά έχεις ένα κουμπάκι.
Can I start now?
Αλεξάνδρα, πρέπει να το βάλεις στην προβολή παρουσίασης.
Δεν ακούω καλά.
Okay. You can put it on screen view.
Εκεί δίπλα στο 64% Νίκο, κάτω το κουμπάκι, να πατήσει.
Ναι. Με ακούς κάτω εκεί που λέει 64% έχει ένα κουμπάκι. Το πατάς και πάμε στην κάτω. Όχι, όχι εκεί καλό μου, αριστερά από εκεί πέρα.
Αυτό.
Επίσης.
Δίπλα στο 80% εκείνο το κουμπάκι.
Επίσης έχει δίκιο ο Δημήτρης και το F5 μπορείς να πατήσεις και θα σε βγάλει.
Δεν μπορώ να ακούσω.
Ωραία. Μπορείς να... Έστω με αυτή τη μορφή. Μπορείς να πας να το κάνουμε έτσι?
Ναι,
Με ακούς?
ακούγομαι όμως.
Είναι. Τέλεια.
Ωραία, ξεκινώ. A medieval statue unearthed outside the Church of Αγία Παρασκευή in Chalkis, Euboea. The Church of Αγία Παρασκευή is located at the Castro area of Chalkida. In its current form, Αγία Παρασκευή is a transseptless, three-aisled colonnaded basilica. In 2019, the effort of Euboean Antiquities, in order to complete the restoration studies for this church, carried out excavations where the present statue was unearthed. Now, it can be seen in the Arethusa Archaeological Museum. The main aim of this presentation is the dating of this statue, the expression of thoughts about its relationship with the rest of the sculpture decoration of the church, and also about Latin sculpture decoration of Chalkida in general. In particular, in the external test trends towards its end to the west, a strong construction was unearthed. A variety of interventions and additions were detected on it, and it can tentatively be identified with the pillar attached to the original western wall of the church. In the northwest part of the considered pillar, this headless statue was found embedded as building material in second use, horizontally placed. It is a limestone statue of a female figure with an almost circular base. The figure, whose clothes retain traces of red paint, wears a tunic and a robe. The inner garment is fastened with an elegant thin belt with a buckle under the breast, while the outer garment...
Alexandra, you need to change also the slides. We don't see the...
I am in slide number 8.
Okay, can you put it on the screen?
You have the same slide, the first.
We have the first one, yes.
You need to press on the left-hand side. Each slide separately.
I have to stop share and start again. Which slide can you see?
2.
Number 2.
Yep.
Now?
Still number 2.
I'll stop sharing again.
No, press on each slide separately on your left-hand side.
Now, which slide can you see?
6.
6.
Yes.
Okay.
Now 7. Now 8.
8. That's excellent. It's a limestone statue of a female figure with an almost circular base. The figure, whose clothes retain traces of red paint, wears a tunic and a robe. The inner garment is fastened with an elegant thin belt with a buckle under the breast, while the outer garment is worn under the left arm. She also wears pointed shoes, of which only the left one is preserved. It is noted that the back of the statue was minimally processed because perhaps it was placed in a decorative niche of the church. Also, at the bottom of its base, there is a blind hole probably used for securing the statue. The torso can be identified with the Mother of God, who holds the infant Christ with her left hand. Only the lower part of the garment and the feet are preserved from little Christ's finger. This specific iconographic type of the Virgin with the baby Christ in her arms is well known from the Byzantine tradition, as it has been depicted in many icons of bust length or full length figures. It is a work of Western art which refers to corresponding small marble figures of the Virgin with the Christ from the Byzantine and Christian Museum in Athens of the 14th century. The setting of the figure of the Virgin as a whole, the rendering of the drapery of her garments, as well as the thin belt with the buckle, are very similar to the limestone painted statue made probably in Paris 1350. The position of the elegant belt under the Virgin's breast, as well as its position in relation to Christ, and specifically to his preserved left leg, refers to a marble statue made in Champagne, France, 1350. The pose of the Virgin and the combination of the two figures in general, as well as the drapery of her garment, can be compared with an ivory statue of North France, 1250, beginning of the 14th century. The arrangement of the garment of the upper part of the Virgin's body, the general position of the infant Christ, and her lost hand must have corresponded to an ivory folding screen made possibly in Paris, beginning of the 14th century, 1325. No doubt, it can be clearly compared with a limestone French statue with traces of polychromy of the 14th century. The similarity can be mainly seen in the pose of the Virgin, as Christ must have had slightly different pose. The overall rendering of the two fingers, combined with the individual morphological elements, such as the Virgin's pose, the position of the belt under the breast of Virgin's figure, the buckle of her belt, the general shape of the figure, the way Virgin holds her garment with one hand and the little Christ with the other hand, and the graceful drapery, lead to the most likely conclusion that it can be dated to the first half, possibly to the first decades of the 14th century. No other similar figure is known from the wider area of Chalkida and from Euboea generally. As it generally shows stylistic analogies with 14th century French sculpture, we can consider it as a work of art of French origin. Michalis Olidios, having studied the sculpture decoration of Agia Paraskevi, has considered that in the impressive sculptural decoration of the triumphal arch of the church, stylistic elements can be seen that recall stylistic trends of the Northern European Gothic art of the second quarter of the 13th century at major northern France. Also, he believes that the bulk of construction of the sculptural decoration of the church would fall in the early 14th century. Consequently, the presence of sculptural decoration in the church, with influences from the French tradition, reinforces the opinion that this particular statue was included in the sculptural decoration of the church. Even if it's true, it does not help us to identify its original position in the church. It seems attractive to think of it adorning the facade of the church because it was found outside it, and it would have been decapitated because of an earthquake, and after that reused as a building material to support the pillar before the shortening of the original length of the church. However, we have no additional information to reinforce this view. We consider it more likely that it decorated the interior of the church, as limestone is a sensitive stone and would avoid being included in the exterior decoration of it. Due to its fragmentary preservation, it is particularly difficult to make observations compared to the sculptural decoration of the triumphal arch above the sanctuary. Also, in the Church of Agia Paraskevi, there is no other statue, nor has any other been found in the ongoing excavations being carried out in the frame of the restoration works of the church. However, in the Church of Agia Paraskevi, some more decorative elements made of limestone are still preserved, such as the impressive Gothic arches that connect the chapels of the tripartite sanctuary with the central part of the sanctuary. Moreover, there are also some more sculptures that used to decorate Agia Paraskevi that are exhibited in the western bastion of the Karababa fortress. In the collection of the lions of St. Mark, a headless marble lion of the 14th century is included. It was incorporated in the western facade of Agia Paraskevi Church until 1853. It can be seen in Christian Hansen's sketches of the church, who visited Chalkis in 1834. Due to Eleni Manolescu, originally it served as a support for a priestly throne. Some quite small Corinth-like column capitals of Western style with abacus, schematic volutes on the corners, acanthus leaves, and rosettes of the 13th-14th century are also included in the Karababas exhibition. Some may have come from the bell tower of Agia Paraskevi. Christian Hansen has also drawn similar capitals in one of his sketches of Agia Paraskevi. An important observation is that no other part of sculptural decoration of the period of the Latin rule has been found until now in the ongoing excavations of Agia Paraskevi, while quite a few fragments of Middle Byzantine marble sculptures from a marble screen, possibly originating from the church, have been identified in second use. This documents the existence of the Middle Byzantine church, view which is additionally reinforced by Middle Byzantine pottery collected during the recent excavation. Furthermore, on this occasion, there will be a brief presentation of some special sculptures dating to the period of Latin rule, and which are exhibited mainly in the western bastion of the Karababa fortress and in the Arethusa Archaeological Museum. Regarding the Venetian lions of St. Mark, which used to decorate the walls of the castle and the bridge of Evribus, since Euboea was conquered by the Ottomans in 1470, they were not replaced by posterior ones as in other Venetian colonies. So, these Venetian lions constitute a unique collection in terms of antiquity, as they date from the 13th until the 15th century and express the gradual transformation of Venice. From a commercial city with communities and privileges, became an empire with complete military force and administrative organization in the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The valuation of the type, from the bust of the monster-figured lion emerging from the sea to the whole-body lion walking on the sea waves and dominating in the continent, symbolically depicts the ideology of Venice. Gradually, until the end of the 14th century, Venice acquired the exclusive control of Chalkis and Euboea, substituting the Lombard triarchs. From these Venetian lions, we especially mention a composite limestone plaque with rare representation of the Lion of St. Mark, second half of the 14th century. Another category of sculptures in the Carababa exhibition are the coats of arms sculptures mainly found in Latin-occupied regions. Of these, we will refer to the marble slab with the Lion of St. Mark in the middle and with the blazon of the Bebo family on the left and of the Loredano family on the right of the 1456. A well embouchure made of Istrian stone, decorated with double carved arches, is also seen in the exhibition of Karababa's fortress. On its cylindrical body, the blazon alternates with a fleur-de-lis, a star, and a five-leaved rosette. It was most probably imported from Venice and dates to the 14th, beginning of the 15th century. This certain well embouchure probably belonged to a well or a sister of a mansion, judging of the coat of arms decorating it. It is believed by various cultures that it can be identified with the one depicted in the courtyard of Hagia Paraskevi in one of the Hansen's sketches. However, it is not certain. To sum up, after studying the recently unearthed statue and dating it to the first half of the 14th century, we hope that until the end of the ongoing excavations, at least the heads of the two figures are found so that we can form a complete view of it and maybe more sculptures to enrich our knowledge of the sculptural decoration of Hagia Paraskevi and generally of the art of Chalkida during the Latin rule. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for sharing with us this amazing find. So can you unshare the screen? Now we have to go through the, yes, and we'll go on with Andrew Blackler. Can you hear us, Andrew? Andrew?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, hello, hi. Do you have a PowerPoint to share?
Right, okay. Let me share my PowerPoint.
Lovely.
And
put it on full screen.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, and now
I'm
I can
actually
see this.
Sorry,
I
hold
am
on a
at the
second.
conclusion, so you have to go back to start from the beginning. So true. So Andrew Blackler, and the title is The Medieval Towers of Central Greece, Byzantine Inspiration or Latin Construct. So.
Okay, right. Much has been written about the medieval towers of central Greece. Generally, they're assumed to have been constructed by minor Frankish feudal lords following their conquest of the region immediately after 1204, as part of a colonial process to project the lords' power and control the Greeks whom they had subjugated. If this colonial tradition is correct, we would expect to find traces of Western influences in the tower's design. Yet Peter Locke, in his groundbreaking 1986 article, was forced to conclude that their style of masonry did not actually conflict with the towers being built by the Franks, whilst Langdon in 1995, studying the towers of Attica, restricted himself to calling them simply mortared. The focus of the present paper, therefore, is to try to analyze their architecture in more detail and compare it first with towers constructed in Crusader Jerusalem and Italy, and then with those in Byzantine Macedonia in northern Greece. It draws on my research over the last 10 years and initial results of the scientific dating of wood samples taken from towers on the Greek island of Evia, known as Negroponte in the medieval period, which I think you all know. Within central Greece, over 200 towers have been identified. These appear to have been spread relatively evenly throughout the three regions of Evia, Boeotia, and Attica. Trying to understand them, however, is a complex problem. In the period under study, the designation Frank, while seemingly referring to foreigners of French origin, actually includes, as attested by the Italian Liutprand of Cremona, a host of Latin-speaking groups from regions of Italy, Spain, and Northern Europe, even Germans. As regards the history, 3 Lombard lords and the Republic of Venice from northern Italy controlled Evia from the 13th to the 15th centuries, whilst the French dominated the mainland until 1311, when the Catalan Company effectively wiped them out and set up a mini-state for about 70 years. The Catalans, in their turn, were supplanted by the Florentines in the 15th century. So before undertaking any comparison, we need first to understand the towers under study. The typical tower is 15 to 18 meters high. General construction is of rough stone, bound with coarse mortar, infilled with tile fragments. The latter appear to have been used only as a pozzolan to harden the mortar and cure it more quickly. Brickwork as an architectural feature, as on Byzantine buildings of the period, is significant by its absence. There are 4 or 5 stories, with each floor resting on a ledge created by the walls reducing in thickness. At ground floor level, there was probably a cistern with small arrow slits on the first floor. Entry was at second floor level, whilst living accommodation appears to have been on the top floor, where good light was provided by large windows on each side. Sometimes the ground floor was vaulted with further vaulting on the opposite axis above the 4th floor to create a fighting platform or one on which a beacon could be lit. Castellation is generally of the chevron style, where we have castellation. From a 17th century spies sketch in the Venetian army, we know that towers in the region may have had battlements or a tiled roof. The same sketch shows how entry was gained at second floor level from a massive 3-story hall or mansion building, which appears to have been at least twice the size of the tower. The sketch shows 3 other sorry, excuse me. The sketch shows 3 other such buildings with attached towers in the Landine plain in central Evia, demonstrating that these 2 were not the exceptions, but the norm. The tower was not the prime building on the site, but an ancillary one. As part of our survey, wood samples taken from within the core of tower walls have been analyzed using carbon-14 dating methods at the Democritus Laboratory in Athens. Initial analysis of 6 towers indicates their construction in the late 13th and 14th centuries. When looking for Italian prototypes, we need therefore to be studying towers constructed in the 12th and 13th centuries. Walls averaged about 8 meters in length. It was surprising, however, that the floor plan of surviving towers in Boeotia and Evia were essentially square and similar in size and height. They follow the red line on the chart, while towers in Attica the white boxes were rectangular. Both window openings and castellation also appeared slightly different. Those in Attica were therefore excluded from my basic comparison, since their configuration seemed to suggest either a French or more probably a post-medieval Ottoman period construction. I will, however, return to the Vrabona Tower later to say something else about it. The forces of the First Crusade, which established the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1098, originated from basically the same regions of Western Europe to those of the Fourth Crusade. And the towers they constructed have been well documented by both Dennis Pringle and Ronnie Ellenblum. Pringle believed, as did T.E. Lawrence, who may be better known to some of you as Lawrence of Arabia, that their fortifications constructed in the early 12th century were based on a typically Western model. I first, therefore, compared the Greek towers with these. It quickly became very clear that their architecture was significantly different. Whilst the height of some that have survived was similar, generally they were more squat and only of 2 floors with a fighting platform above. They were also much larger and often rectangular, with a floor plan measuring 200 square meters, compared to the average in central Greece of less than 60 square meters. Most of this was due to their massive walls, which averaged nearly 3 meters in thickness and appeared to have been designed to withstand an extended siege. Comparison has been made with what are termed in France as maisons fortes, or fortified houses. Secondly, unlike those in central Greece, but similar, as you will see, to Italian towers, walls were constructed with 2 facings of ashlar blocks enclosing a rubble core, bonded with a weak lime concrete or clay, and finer freestone for the coining. Entrances, again unlike towers in central Greece, were invariably at ground floor level. Stairs were often accommodated within the wall thickness. Finally, the use of wood was at a minimum, with a preference for barrel vaulting, not surprising due to the lack of construction timber in the region. So, coming to Italy. There is substantial evidence for towers within an urban environment throughout Lombardy and northern Italy. I compared towers in 7 different places. But their style is again significantly different. The stonework is much finer with minimal window openings. Although providing a defense for the wealthy, these towers seem to have been more about display. Above a height of 20 meters, there's no defensive logic. And some are up to 70 meters high. Only one tower, the gatehouse in Como, is in any way similar. However, a few elite towers in central Greece are exceptions to the general architectural style. Fortunately, we have a photograph from the 19th century of the tower that once stood on the Acropolis in Athens. This was reputedly built by the Acciajuoli family from Florence in the late 14th century. The stonework, window style, and lack of windows are very similar to the Italian samples we've just seen. The rationale for its construction, it dominates the Acropolis and the Parthenon, also seems to reflect elite urban towers in Italy. Another tower in Thebes, the so-called Santomea Tower, constructed in the late 13th century, is also exceptional by both its size and the quality of its stonework. But to me, it appears to be Frankish in style. There is also the possibility that a number of towers in Attica, although I have not studied these in detail, apart from that on the Acropolis, were also constructed by the Florentines. There is a general resemblance. Significant is that whilst the tower in Thebes is freestanding, there are indications that the Acropolis tower was linked to another construction. Here, we may differentiate between Italian urban towers, which are nearly always linked to another building, and French donjons, which were more often freestanding. As regards tower features, such as windows and doorways, I found little consistency either within Italy or central Greece. Quality of finish and style varied considerably between towers. Unfortunately, there are few published examples of towers in the countryside of Italy. But we do know that in the south, from the 12th century, towers of 8 to 12 meters high were being used to protect vineyards, later sugarcane plantations. There is also evidence from 2 documents of the 16th century. One provides a sketch of a prototype estate center as advice to landowners. You can see that in the top left-hand side. The other is a map showing the many towers in the countryside around Rome. And I've tried to pull out 4 towers from this. Unfortunately, you can't really see them very well. These are very similar to the 5 estate towers that we found on the sketch map from the 17th century, which have been recorded close to Negroponte, each of which, as I said before, are linked to hall type or a mansion building. Now, let us look at Macedonia. Over the last 40 years, transcriptions of administrative documents from the monastic enclave of Mount Athos in Byzantine Macedonia, northern Greece, indicate that there were a considerable number of towers being built on monastic estates within the countryside from as early as the 10th century. Excluding those such as Mariana, which you see below in the front of you, where there is significant use of brick and ancient spolia, a number of the surviving estate towers seem to be similar in construction to ones in central Greece. They have neat rows of rough-cut stone bonded with mortar, simple coining, arrow slits on first floor and entrance on the second, although doorways and windows are generally not arched, and the castellations are not in the chevron style found further south, which may be Venetian inspired. So, coming to the end of my conclusion, my general conclusion is that although most of the towers of central Greece do not appear to follow an Italian urban architectural style, they are similar in concept, the addition of a tower as security to an existing hall or mansion, whether urban or the center of an agricultural estate. There are indications that Latin lords may also have been building towers using Greek masons from Macedonia, based on a Byzantine prototype, to which they added their own embellishments. Since the new dating of tower construction points to the 14th century, with none dated prior to 1275, we need to look at this later period, which was one of general instability, in which all the key players were at one time at war with each other, and Turkish corsairs were becoming an increasing threat. Thus, the towers of central Greece were not a tool of colonization constructed by the Franks immediately after their annexation of the region in 1204. Rather, the evidence suggests that they are a product of the general insecurity of the late 13th and 14th centuries, as landowners, whether Byzantine in northern Greece or Latin in central Greece, attempted to protect their estates against potential attack. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And if you could unshare also your screen. Lovely.
I can't find the
It was so great to see so many examples of towers and their architecture. It was a bonus for me. And thank you. And we are going to Dimitra. Dimitra Petru, are you here? Hi, Dimitra. So if you can also, let's do the practicalities. If you
Good evening, Nikos, and to all.
Lovely. Let's try and share your screen and go to the first slide. And so Dimitra
One
Petru.
moment.
Okay.
To share. Okay.
Yep. And let's go to full screen if you want. And the
how I can make this? I'm sorry.
F5. I understood from Dimitris, he said it earlier. F5.
F5. The letter F and 5?
No, there is a one key F5 at the top of the
yes.
That one. Let's see if it works. Otherwise, we're okay with this screen and we'll go with that if it doesn't work. So,
no, I tried to do this. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. It's all right. Let's not lose time.
No, it's nice to see more.
Προβολή παρουσίασης πάνω.
Okay, I found this. Okay. My topic is iconographic peculiarities in the monumental painting of Euboea under Venetian rule. The cases of the churches of Agios Ioannis at Castella and the Holy Apostles at Vouni. From the beginning of the 13th century and the conquest of Constantinople by the Franks and their Venetian allies, Euboea entered a long period of Latin rule, constituting the Regno di Necropode according to Western sources, with the Venetian factor as a constant point of reference.
So sorry, Dimitri, we see your number 10 on my screen at least.
Really?
Yes, I don't see the first one, at least the one you shared.
Why I see from the start.
Okay, then if you can unshare and try it again, at least in my screen, I'm in number 10.
I see from, I have in front of me the first picture. I don't know. I make again.
Yep.
It's okay?
We don't see the full view. We see your computer at this moment, and we see number 1.
What you see now?
Number 1, your computer.
Okay.
Your PowerPoint. Okay.
Okay. This is the first picture, the title. So we go to the second. You see the second?
No, it's still on the first one.
Really?
It didn't go to the full view. It's still on the, Now it's number 3.
Yes, this is 3. But it's not full view.
It's not full view.
I'm so sorry for this.
Oh, it's all right. Don't worry.
Again, I make a try. You see this in full view?
No, I see number 3. It's not
Yes.
coming to full view. Number 1. No.
Now, you see the first picture, the title?
First picture, the title, not in full view, but it's okay. Perhaps.
Because may I have all my full view? I don't know what happens.
Sometimes.
Again, you see the first.
Only the first in your computer view.
Δήμητρα, πρέπει να πατήσει κάθε εικόνα ξεχωριστά. Ας το
Ah,
αριστερό σου χέρι. Δοκίμασε έτσι, όχι με το βελάκι. Κάθε εικόνα ξεχωριστά. Πήγαινε στο 2 τώρα. Πιο κάτω, πιο κάτω. Έτσι, εντάξει.
okay. But it's not full view.
Δεν πειράζει, δεν πειράζει. Okay.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry, I have to start from the beginning. From the beginning of the 13th century and the conquest of Constantinople by the Franks and their Venetian allies, Euboea entered a long period of Latin rule, constituting the Regno di Regnopode, according to Western sources, with the Venetian factor as a constant point of reference. At the same time, the Orthodox East came under the authority of the Latin Church. After the reconstitution of the Byzantine Empire in 1261, the seat of the titular Latin Patriarch of Constantinople was moved to the capital of the island, Chalkis. From 1390, Venice had complete sovereignty over Euboea, with Chalkis as the base of its powerful fleet, until the conquest of the city by the Ottomans, 1470, and the end of the First Venetian-Turkish War, 1479. The late monumental painting developed mainly in the central part of the island, with many well-known and notable fresco ensembles dated from the 13th and early 14th centuries. In contrast, few examples survive from the late 14th century until the end of the Venetian period in Euboea. In our paper, we will display the iconographic peculiarities in 2 mural ensembles, which belong, in our opinion, to this last period. It is about the Church of Agios Ioannis Prodromos at Castella and the Church of the Holy Apostles at Vouni. Monuments that I was involved with as an archaeologist of the first F48 of Byzantine antiquities, the competent service of the Ministry of Culture for Euboea until 2006. The small church of Agios Ioannis Prodromos is located in the village of Castella, about 1 kilometer away from Sahna and 11 kilometers north of Chalkis. The single-naved, originally wooden-roofed church with a 3-sided arch has unfortunately received many modern interventions nowadays that have dramatically altered its form, so that nothing externally bears witness to its antiquity. In the interior, most of the frescoes are covered with plasters, while the visible parts are in a poor state of preservation. Recently, the F48 of Antiquities of Euboea has carried out the first rescue preservation measures, as the archaeologist Alexandra Costarelli informed me, and we hope that the stand-in preservation works will proceed soon. The visible wall paintings in the naos are impressive, as on the 3 walls, scenes belonging to a particularly extensive composition of the Last Judgment are preserved. Scenes of the paradise with the Virgin between the good thief and Abraham, and of the sea and the resurrection of the dead, as well an angel who casts sinners in fire. The arrangement of scenes from the Last Judgment in the walls of the naos is extremely rare and probably indicate the funerary function of the church. Some frescoes are also visible in the sanctuary, and best preserved is Saint Polycarpos among the concelebrating hierarchs. However, we will focus on 3 full-length saints that are preserved on the south wall of the sanctuary and are of great interest from iconographic point of view. The 2 saints to the east are depicted frontal, while the saint to the west is facing the sanctuary. The first saint from the left is depicted in a separate frame. Although the inscription that accompanies him is not fully discernible, from the surviving letters and the pictorial features, we recognize the beloved saint of the Latin Church, Francis. The saint wears a long black tunic with a characteristic loose neckline, tied around the waist with a long knotted rope hanging in front of him. On the rope, 3 knots can be distinguished, which indicate the saint's commitment to poverty, holiness, and obedience, the 3 Franciscan virtues. Despite the extensive damage of the head, it seems that he is rendered tonsatus, as the iconography requires, and beardless, according to the style that was first established by Giotto. The saint holds a rectangular vial in his hand and a closed book in his left one, in his right hand, and a closed book in his left one. Stigmata are also visible on his hands. The brown color with darker shades in the background may indicate a rocky landscape. The representation of Saint Francis, which is identified for the first time in Euboea in the Church of Castella, was until now unpublished. On the contrary, his depictions are known in 4 churches of Crete. Archangel Michael at Kato Astraki Pediados, 13th century, Panagia Kera at Kritsa, circa 1300s, Panagia at Sklaverochori, circa 1400s, and Panagia at Samba, end of 14th, beginning of 15th century. The depiction of the saint in the Church of Castella can be interpreted as a monastery of Saint Francis in nearby Chalkis is attested. Also, the choice of depicting the saint of charity and love for the poor and the weak in the Orthodox Church at Castella is also related to the fact that the saint was particularly popular throughout Christianity. We mention here again the example of Crete, where during the Venetian rule, important Franciscan churches were built in the big cities, as well as the great reverence of the Cretans towards Saint Francis for the healing of diseases. In this context, we can also justify the vial in the right hand of the saint in the Church of Castella. In the next frame to the west, 2 more saints from the west and to the left is frontal and is depicted in a long white tunic and a dark cloak as a Catholic cleric. In his right hand, he holds a cross, and in the left one, a closed book. Like in the case of Saint Francis, there is a lot of damage on his face, and he is tonsatus and beardless. To the right of his head, there is an illegible inscription, and below it, a second inscription, roughly written, mostly in lowercase letters, which we were able to read. In Greek, ο καλούμενος Κυριακός ο Ιούδας, the so-called Kyriakos Judas. The inscription identifies the saint with Judas Kyriacus, patron saint of the Italian city of Ancona, who is celebrated by the Roman Catholic Church on May 4. He is an extremely rare saint depicted in the Byzantine Church, and it is perhaps a unique example in the Greek area. Judas Kyriacus of Ancona is often confused with the legendary Bishop Kyriacus of Jerusalem, who was a Jew by birth and had helped Saint Helen to find the Holy Cross. Later, he became a bishop and was martyred under the Emperor Julian's reign. According to the acta of his martyrdom, the Empress Galla Placidia, daughter of Theodosius I, has donated his relics to Ancona. However, it is definitely necessary to further investigate the relationship between the name of Saint Kyriacus of the second inscription and the illegible name written above, while it is possible that the saint maybe has been renamed. The research will definitely be facilitated after the preservation works. I'm sorry, I didn't show it to you. Judas Kyriacus by Palma Giovanni in Venice, and right, the Cathedral Church of San Kyriaco in Ancona, where are the relics of Judas Kyriacus. In the same frame, to the right, another saint honored by the Roman Catholic Church is depicted, Saint Bartholomew the Apostle, in three-quarter pose facing towards the sanctuary. Unfortunately, most part of the figure is covered today by plasters. The saint is depicted naked with his body flayed, rendering in bright red. In a similar way, the saint is depicted in the church of Agia Pelagia in Anovianos, Crete, 1360, where he also holds his king on his shoulder. As in Byzantine synaxaries, only the death of the saint on the cross is mentioned. The representation here follows the Western iconography, and specifically the Italian art of the 14th and 15th centuries, where scenes of his martyrdom are found. We see here the martyrdom of Saint Bartholomew in a Laudario, a musical codex, by Pacino di Bonaguida, Florence, 1340, and in the Oratorio of Saint Bartolomeo in Prato, dated from 1375 till early 15th century. The saint is also often depicted by northern Italian artists holding or wearing his flayed skin. To render this sense, Western art relied on an apocryphal narrative according to which the king ordered the saint to be flogged and then flayed alive. The presence of popular saints of the Roman Catholic Church in the iconographic program of the church at Castella, especially in the sanctuary, and at the same time the adoption of Western iconography, constitute iconographic peculiarities which can be interpreted in the context of the coexistence of communities of both Christian denominations in conditions of cultural and religious rapprochement. Already from the 13th century, popular forms of worship shared by both Latin and Greek Christians are evident in Euboea. Moreover, in 1336, Pope Benedict XII reported in a letter that Italians and other Latin Christians on the island were marrying Greek women and associated with Orthodox Greeks. The same conditions seem to have continued to exist toward the end of the 14th century, the period in which we date these frescoes. The second group of paintings is located in the Church of the Holy Apostles in the village Vouni, about 30 kilometers northeast of Chalkis. The church is built near springs, which once fed the Venetian aqueduct of Necropode, and in a fertile location where other churches and ruins are also found. The settlement already flourished in the years immediately after the Ottoman conquest, as evidenced in catalogues of 1474. Furthermore, according to the research of Panagiotis Mastrodimitris, the estates of the Latin Patriarchate in Evia and Euboea were in the wider area of Steni, where the village Vouni is located. The Church of the Holy Apostles belongs to the transverse vault church type of category A1, and it seems that it took this form in a second building phase. It has a semicircular arch and a narthex, which is preserved in ruins to the west. In the interior, the longitudinal barrel vault is slightly pointed. The painted decoration is preserved in fragmentary condition and to a large extent covered by crystalline salts, mainly in the arch of the sanctuary, in the transverse vault, and largely in the western vault, where an extensive cycle of the Passion is developed. In the iconography and style of these wall paintings, the Byzantine tradition is followed. However, certain particularities are highlighted here as well. First of all, the decoration on the transverse vault, which is divided by red bands into 3 sections with white background, is of our particular interest. In the central part, a large foliate patriarchal cross is projected between stars, while the side sections consist of various shapes decorated with fleur-de-lis type motifs, reminiscent of similar Western decorations in miniatures and textiles. The cross is found in the illustration of domes in some Cappadocian monuments of the Middle Byzantine era, as well as in the domes of churches in Georgia, where its worship is particularly intense. In our case, we recognize an iconographic unicum in this position and in this era.
Dimitra, just to tell you that you have a couple of minutes to...
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I try to be within the limit.
No, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It should also be noted that the decoration of the transverse vault belongs to the same layer with the rest of the frescoes. The choice in the specific position of the symbol of salvation, but also of the second coming, should definitely be related to the extensive passion scenes. These scenes are distributed in 3 overlapping zones on each part of the western vault and are rendered without dividing bands. The composition consists of many figures. Tall and with volume, dynamically dominate the space with a simple architectural background, more often integrated into groups, adding more drama to the compositions with their movements and the expression of their emotions. They include the rare scenes of the trial of Christ in front of the ruler and the Jewish high priest, as well a detail of the trial of Christ, as well as Pilate washing his hands. Also are depicted the rare episode of the slapping of Christ by a soldier, the mocking of Christ, Christ Elkomenos, the magnificent composition of the crucifixion on the west wall, some details of this, the lamentation, the appearance of Christ to Mary Magdalene, and the incredulity of Thomas. The lamentation is characterized by the position of the Virgin, who embraces the upper part of Christ's shrouded body while sitting on the stone, stepping on a footstool that seems to be floating in front of it. This type is also found in Italian works of the 13th century, which the artists applied by adopting the basic motif from the Byzantine tradition. Especially in Italian art, the changes in the iconography of the Lamentation, as early as the end of the 12th century, follow the changes in the religious life of the era under the influence of the Franciscan spirituality, in which the contemplation of the Passion was of great importance. In the 14th century, this type is depicted as an antiloan in the churches of Crete. We see two examples from Crete, from the Holy Trinity of Rethymno, circa 1400s, and St. John the Theologian at Margarites, Milopotamos, 1383.
Dimitra, we really need to close it. Come to an end. We have already taken also the discussion. So
I'm sorry.
To the next.
I'll try to finish now.
Please.
It's only one paragraph, Nikos. It's only one paragraph.
I'm so sorry. I really apologize. I'm so sorry.
It's one paragraph only.
Okay, thank you.
The last one. Western influences are also detected in the realistic rendering of figures such as the thief and John with crossed arms and face stricken with grief. In the crucifixion, also in the ways of rendering the hairstyle and physiognomic features, such as the rich, elaborate hairstyle of Pilate, in which the urban cosmopolitan environment is reflected, and the long hair of the mourning woman in the crucifixion, while the element of red hair is repeated, which is also a characteristic trait in the late Byzantine painting of Euboea. The drama is highlighted with expressionistic ways of rendering the figures, such as Christ in the incredulity of Thomas, and also John and Joseph of Arimathea in the Lamentation. The elderly figures of the Jews are rendered with strict features, which are intensified by the contrast of light and shadow. In addition, the misshapen figure of the servant in the trial of Christ with the strange hair gives the impression of a foreigner. The emphasis of the cycle of the Passion and the narrative rendering of the scenes are found in late Byzantine art, mainly from the early 14th century, on monuments of the White Balkan area. But it is remarkable that in Italian art they start earlier, and from the 13th century they increase under the influence of Franciscan piety, as in fact it was synonymous with the veneration of Christ suffering on the cross. The exceptional painting decoration of the Holy Apostles at Vouni is the work of a knowledgeable painter who combines the high quality of the Paleologan artistic tradition with influences of Italian art, in particular antiloans and realistic elements that convey the atmosphere of the current conditions. For the dating of the wall paintings, initially, we had proposed with reservation a date around the end of the 14th century, but the research is ongoing. And today, however, we believe that they should be dated possibly around the middle of the 15th century, reflecting the drama and crisis of the historical events in Byzantium and in the last years of the Venetian rule in Euboea. I would like to extend a special thanks to the archaeologists Fanny Stavroulaki and Alexandra Kostarelli from the Foray of Antiquities of Euboea, as well as to the philologist Dimitris Barsakis for their assistance on my research. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dimitra, for showing us this unbelievable material. If you can unshare your screen now. And since we have a little bit covered the time that we had for discussion, I welcome each of you who want to ask something to direct your questions to the speakers individually. And it is my great pleasure to go on to our keynote lecture by Karen Matthews. I think you're here. Hi, Karen. Can you?
I'm here, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Wonderful.
So lovely Karen Matthews will deliver her paper with the title Mediterranean Materiality, Cultural Appropriation and a Shared Visual Language Across the Sea. Can you, let's see now.
All right, let me share the
PowerPoint.
screen here. Okay. Can you all see that?
We see wonderfully, and the floor is yours.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Greetings from California, where I am actually visiting my family for the American Thanksgiving holiday. So we've got a bit of a time difference here. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation to talk with you about the topic of Italian art in Greece and Cyprus. When Pasquale sent me a copy of the abstract for the conference, I told him how impressed I was at the breadth and the number of papers dealing with this important topic of Italian art in the Greek East. The presentations address just about every type of artwork you can imagine: painting, architecture, sculpture, but also glass, metal and woodwork, enamel, ceramics, prints, maps, and textiles. The gamut. They cover 3 central areas of intercultural contact: Cyprus, Crete, and the Peloponnese, but also incorporate art and material culture from numerous Greek islands, Turkey, and even the Black Sea. They also address various mechanisms by which this cultural contact took place, and that's what I'll be talking about today. War, commerce, political negotiations, Christian missions, pilgrimage, and crusade. So I congratulate the organizers on their comprehensive approach to the topic of this conference. I've organized my ideas this evening around 3 moments of contact that comprise mostly a prehistory of the topic of the conference, which, as you see here in the little poster, is 14th to 16th century. The first moment corresponds to the emergence of Italians as merchants in the Mediterranean. In this moment, Byzantium was a power in culture that inspired admiration and emulation, and I will address in this section the importation and emulation of Byzantine forms in Italian art from the 9th to 12th century. The second moment addresses the profound changes that took place in the Mediterranean as a result of 2 crusades, the first in 1099 and the fourth in 1204. They will serve as brackets for a discussion of cultural interaction between Italians and the Byzantine Empire. Reciprocity rather than unidirectionality characterized encounters in this time period, as the political situation became more fluid and volatile. The conquest of Greek territories by Latins and Italians in particular brought the cultural production of the Italian peninsula into dialogue with the visual culture of Greece and Cyprus, creating a new hybrid synthesis. Finally, in the third section, I will move on to the early modern period and the alliances made to confront the Ottoman threat. Relations between Italian and Greek territories became more conciliatory as they understood the importance of a united front against a mutual enemy. In Italian art, Greeks might still represent an other, but a good other, Christians who served as reliable partners with shared goals. I'm obviously going to be painting with a broad brush here, and I know that the papers that have already been and will be presented at this conference will add the necessary nuance, depth, and specificity to my introductory comments here. The first section I would label Byzantine art in Italy. In this case, Byzantium is referencing the metropole predominantly, with Constantinople being the touchstone for culture and the center of economic exchange. By Italy, I'm mostly referring to coastal areas and maritime cities, where commerce brought merchant mariners into contact with cultures around the sea. So here the points of contact are limited, and the movement of people, ideas, raw materials, and finished artworks basically unidirectional. Byzantium was the aspirational culture that the Italians wished to imitate. Amalfi and Venice were early entrants into Mediterranean economic and cultural networks and adorned their public monuments with Byzantine objects or constructed them following Byzantine prototypes. The bronze doors of the Cathedral of Amalfi on the left here were created by a Byzantine artist in Constantinople. Their display spurred a taste for bronze doors in southern Italy that included the monastery of Monte Cassino and the Cathedral of Salerno, shown here on the right. In Venice, as I'm sure I need tell no one here, the Basilica of San Marco was modeled on the Church of the Holy Apostles in Constantinople. Its decoration featured Byzantine-style mosaic decoration, and enamel work is seen in the Pala d'Oro that I'm showing you here. And other religious structures in Venice followed Byzantine decorative traditions, like Santi Maria di Donato on Murano and the Cathedral of Torcello, once again shown here. In Liguria and Tuscany, the decorative use of ceramic basins or bacini also incorporated Byzantine products. The Campanile of San Giovanni Pre in Genoa and the Church of San Michele degli Scalzi outside of Pisa display Greek wares alongside Islamic pottery. And I know that the bacini will be addressed in later presentations in this conference. So Byzantium here was an admired culture with a visual language that referenced beauty, power, longevity, magnificence, and sovereignty. Constantinople was a key economic hub, and newcomers like Pisa and Genoa vied with well-entrenched cities like Amalfi and Venice for market share and a physical presence for their merchants in the capital and other important ports. In other Italian cities like Ravenna, Byzantine visual forms represented a long-standing political presence and integration into the empire. But in the cases I just referenced, particularly Pisa and Genoa, these Italian cities viewed Byzantium from afar, and artistic borrowings displayed an interest in being incorporated into this great empire's cultural and economic spheres. So in this early phase then, cultural interaction was by and large unidirectional and hierarchical. Byzantium was a superior culture that elicited admiration. The Italian maritime cities referenced here wanted to be like Byzantium and wanted to be in Byzantium. Emulation denoted knowledge, inside information that came from interaction, cultural, economic, and political, with this great empire. In this second section, I would like to analyze the profound changes in the relationship between the Byzantine world and Italy brought about by the crusading movement. The First and Fourth Crusades served as watershed moments that dramatically changed the Mediterranean balance of power. Objects from Constantinople and the Greek world continued to flow into Italy, though their meaning and function were irrevocably altered. Perhaps the greatest transformation in this time period, though, was the establishment of Latin territories in the East as a result of the First Crusade, and in Constantinople and Greek territories in the aftermath of the Fourth Crusade. This section then will be divided into two: the altered understandings of Byzantine art in Italy as a result of Crusade, and visual manifestations of the Italians in Greek territories. Interchange is now much more reciprocal, but also more complex, comprising antagonism, appropriation, appreciation, expansion, and cultural intermingling and hybridity. So first, Byzantine art in Italy. One of the greatest repercussions in material culture from these crusades was the influx of plunder, real or imaginary, into Italy. Instead of borrowing from Byzantium, the Italians started to steal. They challenged Byzantine power on land and sea and brought back home physical reminders and mementos of their military victories that were prominently displayed in and on public monuments. In the 12th century, the Venetians in particular began robbing Byzantine churches of relics and proudly recorded the thefts in literary and historical works. They took the relics of St. Nicholas, Stephen, Isidore, and Donatus, placing them with honor in key churches in Venice. Isidore's relics received a new home in the eponymous chapel in San Marco, the Cappella di Sant'Isidoro, in the 14th century. There, an extensive cycle of mosaics documented the theft and highlighted the role of the Doge, seen with his distinctive cap there, and his promotion of this new cult. Plunder of war, however, consisted of more than just relics, and numerous decorative objects in and on San Marco have been construed as spoils of war, particularly from the Fourth Crusade. The problem with this assessment is that many of these famous objects are not documented as being in Venice until centuries later. We could put them then in the realm of fictive plunder, objects the Venetians would like to see as spoils appropriated from Constantinople in 1204, but things that may have actually been purchased rather than stolen. The porphyry tetrarchs, pilastri acritani, even the Nicomedia icon certainly came from Constantinople, but it is not clear when. What is important here is that the Venetians wished these objects to be understood as war plunder, whether they actually were or not. They demonstrated a new aggressive mentality towards Venice's former overlord, one that foregrounded supersession and triumph, and symbolized a profound shift in power that had long-term repercussions for Mediterranean politics. Another example of shifting perceptions of Byzantine art in Italy can be seen in the painting in the so-called maniera greca, or Greek style. This style can be seen in monumental works like the mosaic decoration in Pisa's cathedral, or the frescoes in the Cathedral of San Lorenzo in Genoa. In these two examples, we might talk about a continuation, however, of the cultural borrowing from Byzantium that characterized artworks in the first section of this talk. There is evidence, for example, in Genoa of a Byzantine artist who may have been responsible for these frescoes that I'm showing you here. Of extraordinary popularity in the 13th century, this Greek style of painting took inspiration from Byzantine icons of the Odogatria type, but transformed them into distinctly Italian creations. The National Gallery in Washington, D.C. attributes the Melon Madonna, here on the right, to a Byzantine workshop of the 13th century, while the image on the left by Berlinguero is an early Italian adaptation of Byzantine imagery that would have made its way to Europe after the Fourth Crusade. This type of emulation came from a place of admiration. Byzantine icons were believed to be devotional objects par excellence. They moved the viewer and activated the relationship between worshiper and image. They were also imitated because of their purported antiquity, miraculous origins, or miracle-working powers. The Cambrai Madonna embodied these characteristics to such a degree that this copy of a Byzantine work was believed to be a Byzantine original, perhaps even the image of the Virgin Mary painted by St. Luke himself. Byzantine icons were powerful, authentic, and authoritative, and their Italian copies attempted to partake in these qualities. The maniera greca also played an important role in Renaissance art. Though denigrated by critics like Vasari, it served as an important foil for the new style. Even as Italian Renaissance art moved in a different direction, art patrons and connoisseurs continued to collect Byzantine icons. The Medici in Florence are a good example of this, creating a vibrant market that was fed by artists from Venetian-controlled Crete. And we'll get to that topic a little bit later. This industry constituted a second moment of popularity for the maniera greca that I will return to in the third section of my talk. So now in this second section of the second part, I'm turning the tables and addressing a new type of artistic production, the visual forms employed by the Italians when they moved definitively into the Mediterranean and established colonies, territories, and even empires in former Greek-controlled lands. What visual branding did they develop that represented their hegemony and sovereignty? And how did that change over time? I will address three locales where this interaction was at its most intensive and where we see the development of new art forms as a result of this intercultural contact. Our first stop is the Peloponnese. where there was an influx of Latin populations from various European countries after the Fourth Crusade. The two main types of structures created by the Latins were fortifications, castles, fortresses, fortified ports, and churches for the celebration of the Catholic rite. Though not built by an Italian patron, the Church of Merbaca is a prime example of the new hybrid style that characterized the Peloponnese in the time of Latin rule. Built by the Latin Archbishop of Corinth, soon after he took office in 1287, the structure combines visual elements from Latin and Orthodox ecclesiastical architecture. It is also decorated extensively with spolia, including ceramics from various production centers in Italy, the Veneto, Brindisi, and other southern Italian cities. What makes this eclectic approach so interesting is that it was also employed in Orthodox churches as well. The Church of Panagia Cattolici in Gastuni shares extraordinary similarities with Merbaca. It consists of a Byzantine-style church with Western European details and also possesses Bacchini decoration. The building's patrons, however, were Greek nobles, elites who prospered under the new regime. Did they build in the shared style to show an affinity to Latin rulers, to display their own cosmopolitan taste, or simply work within the prevailing fashion and architecture of this time? What we can say is that in the Peloponnese, a visual bilingualism developed that made monuments mutually intelligible and transcended political tension and animosity between foreign ruling elites and their subject people. In a more aggressive and triumphalist manner, new Latin overlords marked their possession of new territories through the construction of palaces and fortresses. These buildings obviously served a practical function in protecting land, but also access to it from the sea. Mostly, however, they defended newly conquered Italian territories from other Italians. The Genoese-Venetian rivalry for strategic islands and Mediterranean market share was particularly fierce, and locales changed hands back and forth between them throughout the 13th to 15th century. The island of Chios is a perfect example of this. The Genoese fortified their ports in key locations across the Mediterranean and Black Sea, as did the Venetians on islands like Corfu and Crete, to which we will return a bit later. Both of these maritime republics also created religious structures in their trading outposts and colonial possessions. In Constantinople, the Galata Tower still stands over the area designated as a Latin quarter in the later Middle Ages. There, the Arab Jami, or Arab Mosque, attests to the large and influential colony from Liguria there. The church dates to the 1320s to 1330s, created by the Dominican order, and featuring Latin elements, groin vaults, a Gothic portal, and lancet windows. You see an image of the campanile, or bell tower here in the center. A local style of brickwork, however, might indicate that masons from Constantinople worked on the building, and a similar argument has been made concerning frescoes rediscovered in 1999 after an earthquake brought them to light. And those you see probably obscured by all the images here on the right, a partial view of a coronation of the Virgin Mary. This building manifests a balance or equilibrium between imported forms and local materials and techniques that was the hallmark of numerous Mediterranean structures from this period. Moving to Venetian territories, we have numerous examples of the Venetians imposing their visual branding on their Mediterranean colonies, but also displaying a mentality of accommodation towards local artistic traditions. Wherever they went, the Venetians marked their territory with lion sculptures. The 3-volume work by Alberto Rizzi from 2012, cataloging these lions, attests to their omnipresence across the Mediterranean. The effectiveness of this branding was such that the Genoese would steal the lions when they conquered cities from Venice, displaying them prominently in their home city, So a few lines from Venice itself, from the Scuola Grande di San Marco, from various possessions across the Mediterranean, and on the far right there, from the Church of San Marco a Molo in Genoa. This is a lion sculpture that was taken from the city of Pula in Croatia. In Heraklion, also known as Candia, the Venetians built the Church of St. Mark in 1239. It was constructed in a Gothic style and located next to the Duke of Candia's palace. St. Mark's was a ducal chapel like its namesake in Venice, and also served as the burial place for local rulers. The three-aisled interior features pointed arches and granite columns that may be spolia from earlier structures, again, a pan-Mediterranean aesthetic. In this implantation of Venetian architecture in a new colony, the dedication of the building connected it to the ducal basilica in Venice. The architectural form itself, what Georgopoulou has called regional or Levantine Gothic, is a readily recognizable version of the Gothic where visual characteristics have become genericized as they cross the sea in these far-flung outposts. The Gothic merged with local forms, materials, and techniques so that Levantine Gothic structures resemble each other more than they do Gothic structures in Italy, for example, and particularly in the birthplace of the Gothic style, the Ile-de-France. The transmission of the style was like sound waves that become fainter as they move away from the source, a distant echo of a prototype that may no longer have any relevance. Another point to make about the transmission of an artistic style is that the meanings of forms change over time. What began as a definitively foreign style becomes assimilated to the point that it becomes local. The origins are forgotten so that now it represents us, not them, our interests and concerns, not those of another time or place. This idea of assimilated forms can certainly be seen in Cyprus. The Venetians arrived there late and remained in power for less than a century. Under the Lusignan, a tradition of Gothic architecture, and more specifically royal Gothic architecture, had been established for centuries. The style announced power and prestige to such a degree that when the Greeks rebuilt their cathedral in the early 14th century, they did not create a Byzantine style structure, but constructed the church in the Gothic style. This style then did not say east or west, but was a local idiom that everyone could understand and appreciate. The Venetian monuments on Cyprus work within a Renaissance idiom. We go back here to the Palazzo dei Provveditori, juxtaposed with the pre-existing Gothic structures in a mixture of styles that would have been familiar to them from their home city. They also continued to build fortifications on the island marked with their symbol, the lion. Earlier walls, castles, and towers were refurbished and strengthened to ward off the greatest threat they and other Mediterranean powers faced in the 15th century, the Ottoman Empire. The very locations where the Venetians had established their control over key Mediterranean territories were taken one by the Ottomans. Thessaloniki, Evia, the Morea, including Mathoni, shown here, and Koroni, the eyes of Venice, and other key islands were lost as well. The painting by Carpaccio of a young knight in a landscape evokes the nostalgia of this period. The figure represented here has been identified as Marco Gabriel, rector of Mathoni, as it was besieged by the Ottomans in 1500. The castle itself is shown in the background on the left. So in this third part of my talk, we might speak of rupture, with the Mediterranean status quo altered dramatically. But we can also speak of consolidation, concord, and even continuity as new alliances were made to face the Ottoman threat. The union of the Latin and Orthodox churches ratified at the Council of Florence in 1439 displays this new conciliatory attitude. The Byzantine Emperor John VIII Palaeologos traveled to Florence to participate in the council and there made quite an impression. Pisanello made sketches and designed a medal that depicts the emperor's distinctive headgear. The emperor became a symbol of the knowable East, an other, but a good other, in comparison to the Ottomans. His likeness was incorporated into 15th and 16th century Italian painting that attempted to display some knowledge of the East. In Benozzo Gozzoli's frescoes in the Medici Chapel, dated to 1459, John VIII is represented as one of the Magi, an Eastern king who recognized and paid homage to Christ's divinity. Piero della Francesca's flagellation, created slightly later in 1468 to 70, depicts a figure with similar headgear who has been identified as Pilate, condemning Christ to torture and death. So we would classify this as a considerably more negative reusing of these kind of Byzantine, or these images of the Byzantine emperor. In the Orientalist paintings of Vittore Carpaccio, costume plays an important role in identifying friends and foes in an Eastern environment. In the Triumph of St. George, dated to 1502, different Eastern peoples are distinguished by Byzantine, Mamluk, and Ottoman dress. Over in the right-hand corner, which once again may be occluded by the images of participants here, we have a group of different peoples. We've got a figure with the red hat and the red garment. It was in Mamluk dress. The figure immediately next to him has got that sort of Byzantine headgear that we saw on the emperor. And then to the right, and then among various figures in the painting, we see this large white turban with the red cap. That is an indication of someone from the Ottoman Empire. The baptism of the Selenites in the same painting cycle, dated to 1507, takes a differentiation even further. As George baptized pagan peoples, over there to the right in the painting, a figure with an Ottoman turban takes off his distinctive headgear and kneels to accept conversion into the Christian faith. That's going on right there in the middle of the painting. A wished-for scenario on the part of Mediterranean Christians is played out here, where a hostile Eastern power is neutralized, a fantasy that unfortunately did not occur outside of Carpaccio's painting. I would like to end my presentation by returning to a topic mentioned earlier, the Maniera Greca, and the continued popularity of religious painting in the Greek style in the 15th, 16th, and even extending into the 17th century. Crete remained an essential production center for this type of painting, particularly after the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Venice once again showed itself as the heir to the Byzantine Empire, galvanizing resistance to the Turks through its its Orthodox subject peoples. The icons produced here were authentic touchstones to a lost empire. The artists, Greek and Latin, made artworks in Greek and Latin styles for a market that could not get enough of these images. They also made hybrid works with an eclectic style and iconography from an amalgam of elements that mirrored the multicultural environment of Crete in the early modern period. And George is, once again, behind the images here. George is a saint who could appeal to both Eastern and Western populations, Latin and Greeks alike, or you could kind of transform this warrior saint in Aios Dimitrios if you wanted a specifically Byzantine type of figure. So we could classify Crete as a multicultural environment, or is the term multicultural really effective in this context by the time we reach the 17th century? Like its artistic products, Cretan society was a hybrid fusion, centuries in the making, a synthesis forged out of rivalries, antagonism, cooperation, and cultural appreciation. So what conclusions can we draw from this broad overview that I presented here? I would like to return to two terms I've used throughout the presentation: bilingualism and hybridity. Living in Miami, bilingualism is a fact of life, with the vast majority of the population fluent in both Spanish and English. With such ease and facility in both languages, communication flows by choosing the most meaningful elements from each language and combining them at will. A similar bilingualism characterized the places and timeframes addressed here, where patrons, builders, and artists could have and did work in one visual language or the other, as seen in icon production in either alla greca or alla latina modes. However, there was also a strong preference for hybridity, working in a mixed, synthetic style that had great resonance because it spoke to local conditions and concerns. It announced that these works were from a particular place and fixed in time. So perhaps instead of placing such an emphasis on origins, where this or that motif came from and why, we can concentrate our attention on this new synthesis, analyzing why these eclectic combinations were considered useful and beautiful. So I would like to end with a question. Why, after so many centuries of contact and interaction, was this Italian-Greek nexus so powerful, fruitful, and inspiring to the people who inhabited the locales where these two cultures came together? I am sure that the papers in this conference will shed considerable light on this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen, for this unbelievable, for giving us all the, speaking about all the artistic interactions of over such a long period, and giving us a lot of, food for thought, future thought. And now I'm going to ask Elena Papastavru. She's here, I think, to take over. Elena, can you hear us? Just a moment. She must be here to take over for the next session. Paschalis, do you know if Elena has joined?
I cannot see her, Nikos.
Is Maria, I can see you. Xenar, you. Perhaps you would like to...
Of course. Yes, I'm here.
Lovely. Perhaps you can, you want to start with the next session, the first paper, until Elena joins us. And if you can share your screen, and the title of your paper is Places and Time in the Illustration of Italian Maps and Isolaria, 15th to 16th century, from the Finopoulos collection at the Benaki Museum.
Yes, it's truth. A moment, please.
And the title of this fourth session is dedicated to Italian icons, icon frames, maps, and isolaria. So another fruitful domain of exchanges in the Mediterranean. So the share button is at the green thing at the lower part of your screen. When it says
I see, but so.
And you can put in full screen. I only see the computer screen.
Now it's full screen.
We see number 4, and it's your computer view.
Now it's okay.
We see again, I see again number 4, your number 4 slide on the screen view. Perhaps you would like to put your first one and use the...
I try again. I start for the beginning.
Okay.
Now?
Yes, we see now your screen, and it is number 1. Lovely.
So I can start. I would like to thank the organizing committee for the honoring invitation to be part of this very important conference. Also, I would like to thank my colleagues, Konstantinos Stefanis, Athina Zoupadi, and Mirka Paliura for their support. And I will present you the early illustration Italian maps on 15th and 16th century. So the Mediterranean cartographic composition of the 15th and 16th centuries condenses the collective memory from antiquity to modern times. It is the common historical basis on which materials are accumulated from the storage of experience, knowledge, philological literature with the assistance of symbolism and imaginary elements. The old maps try to reconstruct the complex physiognomy of the space through images, names, and symbols. The old maps include, along with a cartography of the area, a multitude of indirect and contemporary information. Cartographic marking during the Renaissance is treated as a functional set of standardized symbols whose origin is sought in the figurative education of the time. The 15th and the 16th centuries are the era of the gradual imposition of the map as a means of inventorying and communicating a wide range of information recorded in space. It is the period in which educated elites believed they could communicate with images and thus systematically cultivate iconography. The verbal and laboratory cartographic production will turn to issues of analytical mapping of the hinterland. The cartographic techniques employed in these works come from the tradition, the miniature topography, which experienced significant developments in the 15th century. The reappearance of the work Geographical Narrative by Alexandrian geographer Claudius Ptolemaeus played a decisive role by giving a more abstract direction to the mapping of space as it freed cartography from the visual simulation of physical space. At the same time, in the same period as the translation of the geographical narrative, the island records also appear. The maps we examine here come from the map collection of the Finopoulos collection of the Benaki Museum and are maps that accompany narrative text such as the work of Cristoforo Bondelmonti, Benedetto Bordone, and Francesco Ferretti. Early island chronicles used titles related to Ptolemy's distinctions. The island charts, isolari, are Protolian atlases dedicated exclusively to the islands. The maps included in these works accompany the extensive narrative description, which they illustrate and summarize. They are not bearers of information. Rather, they visualize the textual narrative and characterize the scholarly preoccupations of the humanistic circles of the time. The isolaria are considered an auxiliary tool that complements and enriches the reading of the accompanying texts in order to remember and understand the information contained in the work. The island logs, isolari, express the meeting of the medieval cosmography with the modern needs of a one-word empirical description of the islands. The earliest work of this new type is the Liber Insularum Archipelagi by Cristoforo Buondelmonti, who will be the first to describe, after field observation, most of the islands he visits. And his work will influence as a model for future isolari. In the Finopoulos collection, there is an abridged form of Buondelmonti's work with the Latin text, which was published by Sinner in Leipzig and Berlin in 1824, without illustration, and a Legrand's edition in 1897. From Legrand's edition, we see the description of Constantinople, where we see now in our image, Constantinople, where only the historical monuments of the city are depicted, giving us its humanistic and archaeological specificity.
Maria, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We still see your first slide on our screens.
Oh.
Can you please go to the one that you are talking about?
I see the first one. Excuse me. Now?
It's still the first one.
Oh.
That you have.
Μαρία, κάνε το ελεύθερα αριστερά. Σε κάθε slide κάνε αριστερά κλικ. Κάνε στο 2 τώρα, αν θέλεις.
Ναι.
Έτσι.
Προχώρα το έτσι manually. Εντάξει.
Εντάξει. Τώρα είμαστε εδώ. Ναι. Third image. Okay. Τώρα το βλέπετε.
Ναι.
Now, all right. We are in the first image. So, right. From Legrand's edition, we see the depiction of Constantinople, where only the historical monuments of the city are depicted, giving us its humanistic and archaeological specificity. The second image from the same publication depicts Astipalea with a shifted orientation and little evidence of the natural landscape, the urban built-up area, a castle with few toponyms. The outline of the island is drawn in summary with stylized simplification. In the Gennadius manuscript, where Andros is depicted, the island is orientated east at the bottom of the map instead of south. On the map, we recognize the color codes applied by Buondelmonti by painting the sea green, the lowlands in light brown, and the relief elements in white, such as the mountainous parts of the island, the ancient and modern monuments. Cristoforo Buondelmonti, in his original works, gives his text the color key on his maps, but they are not followed by subsequent cartographers. The island records a kind of impression of the space, express the meeting of the medieval cosmography with the modern needs of a one-word empirical impression of the islands. Buondelmonti would become the first cartographer to describe from field observation most of the islands he visited, and the work produced from his experience would influence future Isolarian. The marking followed by the editor is drawn up with a conventional system inherited from the tradition of miniature topography. The fortifications of residential complexes are depicted where an attempt is made to render their true physiognomy, as well as depiction of residential houses and light houses. A topographic map maker is usually a micrographer, and topographic maps are images related to the illustration of a geographic, historical, or archaeological text whose information they summarize and organize. The maps images that function as a bibliographic framework will encourage the study of technical mathematical methods for the organized representation of space. The maps of Benedetto Bordone, Francesco Ferretti, and Marco Boschini clearly show their influences from the works of Cristoforo Buondelmonti and Bartolomeo da Lisonetti. The map of Cefalonia is in loose form and comes from the edition Isolario di Benedetto Bordone, nel quale si ragiona di tutte le isole del mondo del 1534. They are briefly presented the sparse urban landscape, the natural relief, a temple monument, and on one side of the island, with dots, the shallow parts of the island. Also, we notice the complete absence of any scale indication. The dangerous grounding points are marked with a cross with the orientation direction signs. The island of Cefalonia is not mapped in the usual Western way, with north at the top, but with a perception of nautical charts for the purpose of memorizing the ways of running aground. The stylized way of illustration is supported by the woodcut technique, which, due to the medium, limits the abundance of information. The few elements of the map, the name of the island, the oversimplified morphology of the terrain, the few settlements, as well as its posterior coloration, give the publishing venture a commercial success. The maps we see are from Diporti Notturni, Dialoghi familiari del capitano Francesco Ferretti, on loose leaves. Most of Ferretti's maps are mostly incorrect in the orientation and locations of the island. This is probably because he was based on an inverted original with the square shape of the island, reminiscent of Buondelmonti's map. The capacity of cosmographer I lose. Can you see the image, the video?
We see the image of Marco Boschini. map of Paros.
Excellent. We are on 8th image. All right. In the capacity of cosmographer, as he called himself, or geographer, he publishes the island chart of the Aegean Sea, l'arcipelago con tutte le isole, which is based on the island charts of his predecessors, Bondelmonti, Bartolomeo degli Sonetti, e Benedetto Bordone. The Isolario itself, while not presenting new cartographic elements, is a reference for later similar publications, such as the works of Dapper and Maneson Mallet. At the end of the 15th century, the handwritten maps of the Alexandrian geographer Claudius Ptolemy, 2nd century AD, were printed for the first time. They were called Ptolemaic, and they influenced later cartographers for many years. Early maps roughly outlined the geographic outline of an area, its geophysical features, monuments, and place names, often drawn directly from Strabo and Ptolemy. The map we see comes from the edition Claudii Ptolemei, and it is in a loose leaf with the good woodcut technique. The depiction of the Greek island space preserves an independent aesthetic in relation to the modern development of the Renaissance three-dimensional study of the space. Coastal cities, islands, and Henter retransmit throughout time the Ptolemaic simulation of a perspective that simplifies geophysical formations, condensing them into simple contour and symbols. Details of the natural built landscape, place names, and monuments are often transmitted verbatim from the ancient sources, Strabo and Ptolemy. The perception of time in the maps of the 15th and 16th centuries runs the outline of a timeline that delves into the distant past of cartographic writing, reproducing elements of a tradition that permits the modern. The past tense is identified with the present, delaying the recording of the technological developments that occur suddenly in the field of arts. The development of technology, the achievements in navigation, the political social upheavals gradually shape an expanded way of worldview that will be reflected in cartography. Already from
finishing.
All right. Already from the middle of the 16th century, the time perception of the place will gradually adapt to the new data and will contribute to the great renewal of cartography production. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was a wonderful material and so vividly and many times understudied. So it's wonderful that you brought it to us.
Thank you very much.
No, Paschalis, if we are to proceed to the next, our next speaker, Mara Perikoku. I see you. Hello, Mara.
Hello, how are you?
Great. If you have a PowerPoint.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
May I share my screen?
Yes, please. And your title is Italian Wood-Carved Frames on Post-Byzantine Icons from the collection of the Bernacchi Museum. It's lovely. And if you can
Yes, give me a second.
Great.
Is it okay now?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation to begin with. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to present at the conference Above the Curve, the frame of the icon of the Adoration of the Magi by Domenikos Theotokopoulos. That presentation gave the spark for new research on the frames of the collection of icons of the Benaki Museum. The collection of icons of the Benaki Museum has two types of frames, the detachable ones and the attached frames to the icon. For this presentation and the current research, we will focus only on the category of detachable frames, and we will manage to present 14 from the plethora of the examples of the collection. The choice of the specific number is based on the different types and variety of frames. Moreover, the group of detachable frames is interesting in order to look closely at the relations of the icon and its frame. For the economy of time, we will not discuss the iconography or style of the icons presented here, and we will not analyze in depth the description of each frame. The main focus is to show you the variety of different examples of frames on post-Byzantine icons. The questions remain the same as the presentation of the frame of the El Greco icon, but with a small twist. Were the specific frames an original part of the icon, or were they later additions by the owners? Since some of the icons that we will present here are displayed without the original frame, how is the public perceiving the objects, with or without the frame? In the light of new approach and data concerning the frames of the icons, should the scholars and us, the curators, reconsider their display? From this brief presentation, I hope that we will be able to address in some way the questions. Firstly, I will start with a missing frame, the frame of the icon of St. George slain dragon, dated in the second half of the 15th century by Cretan workshop. The icon is well published and well displayed in a variety of periodical exhibitions abroad, without the original frame. When donated to the Benaki Museum in 1945 by Panagiotis Lidorikis, it had its original frame, as you can see from the black and white photograph of the inventory card of the museum. The dimensions stated on the inventory card, 37.7 by 28.4 centimeters, correspond to the bare icon, so we don't have even the dimensions of the frame. From the photo, we can guess, we believe, that the frame is a cassetta one, with floral motifs quite similar to cassetta frames of the 16th century Venetian workshops. Unfortunately, we cannot see much detail and we don't have better photographs. The next very interesting frame is the one of the Adoration of the Magi by Domenikos Theotokopoulos. As said previously, the specific frame was the topic of my first presentation on frames, so I will not elaborate on the issue. The icon is safely dated circa 1560-67, and it was acquired by Antonis Menakis in 1934. The dimensions of the icon with the frame are 55.9 by 62 by 5.4 centimeters. The design of the decoration, the size, and the material correspond in characterizing the specific item in the category of cassetta frames of Italian Renaissance, dated around the 16th-17th century. The interesting element of the frame is that it was cut in order to fit the icon. So we know it was not designed for the specific object. Next, the icon of the Virgin of Tenderness, also from a Cretan workshop, dated in the 16th century, with a very interesting but later frame. The object is decorated with bone plaques and tortoiseshell, with carved floral decoration with a shadow effect. The size of the icon with the frame again is 65 by 54, and was donated to the Benaki Museum by Maria Hellenic. The icon unfortunately has extensive damage due to harsh cleaning, followed by a retouching of the painting from previous conservation. Again, although it is well published and traveled in periodical exhibitions, there is no mention of the art of the frame. The design, the unusual material, and the decoration have similarities with 17th and 18th century cassetta frames from southern Italy workshops, with a more solid dating close to the 18th. The following frame in question is the magnificent in size, gold-gilt frame of the signed icon of Theodoros Poulakis, Indeed Rejoice, dated around 1665 and 1670. The size of the icon along with the frame is 120 by 93 by 12.5 centimeters. The impressive frame can be classified as a cassetta one, decorated with carved wine leaves and scrolls, with 4 acathus leaves on the corners and 4 cherubim on the middle of its edge. It was acquired by Antonis Benakis in Alexandria, and it was displayed at the first permanent exhibition of the museum in 1931. The back edge has a stylized egg and dart decoration that corresponds to the decoration of the side edge. The frame has many similarities with late 17th, early 18th century frames from Veneto. Still, more detailed research has to take place in order to safely date the object. The icon of St. Nicholas with Vita scenes has also a beautiful frame, and was one of the first acquisitions of Antonis Benakis in 1919, and also firstly displayed in the permanent collection in 1931. It is a signed work by Laskaris Lichoudis, dated in 1733. The frame is red with gold-gilt acathus leaves and flowers. The frame decoration has many similar elements with frames from Naples or southern Italy, dated around the 17th, 18th century. In my opinion, though, the specific frame is of late 17th century style, but made in the 19th century, as there are many documented cases where the style of the frame imitates the style of an earlier era. Again, only a closer look will reveal a safe date. The next group of icons come from the Valadoros bequest to the Benaki Museum in 2007. Tassos Valadoros collected a variety of icons, liturgical vessels and vestments, as well as antiquities and rare books. Before her passing, his sister Maria Valadorou donated the whole collection to the Benaki Museum. Here we see a Caliculi design frame of the early 18th century that is part of the icon of the Dormition of the Virgin, dated around the 16th, 17th century, possibly of a follower of a Cretan school. The size of the frame is 75 by 50 centimeters. It is decorated with symmetrical pierced caliculi that are similar with frames from Bologna. At the bottom edge, there is a fleur-de-lis, a symbol not only of royalty, but in this case, a symbol of the Virgin. The icon of Descent into Hell, dated 1778, has a carved pierced frame. The iconography seems to be the model, following the model of a Cretan school. The frame is quite elaborate, with dimensions from 44 by 35 centimeters. The back edge is decorated with pierced acathus leaves. The side edge is decorated with a point arch resting on 2 columns with the same repeated motif of the pierced floral decoration of the back edge on the top of the arch. The pierced carved decoration on the back edge shows influences from the Caliculi frames of the 18th century. The arch-type decoration of the 2 columns seems to have similar structure with attached icon frames, such as the ones an icon from a Dodecaorton scene, the scene of Annunciation, dated 1779, from the same bequest. The only difference, of course, besides the point arch, is that the illusion of a frame is painted on the carved wood. I believe that the specific frame can be safely dated around the 19th century, And while it seems that it was not constructed to fit a specific icon, it is now an integral part of it. Next, we see two icons with the same subject matter, the Nativity, and with elaborate similar cassetta frames. The icon on the right is not part of the Valadoros bequest, as is the one on the left. It can be dated around the 16th century, with many similarities with Cretan workshops. The size of the frame is 66 by 5.5, by 54 centimeters, and it is a recent donation of 2022. It's decorated with pierced wine leaves in medallions with 4 acanthus leaves on the corners. The icon on the left is dated at the end of the 17th, early 18th century, and it is based on the engraving of a famous Flemish artist, Jan Sadeler. The cassetta frame is decorated with alternating wine leaves and crosses, while at the corners are flowers. The dimensions are 71.5 by 52 centimeters. Although it's tempting to talk about the iconography, we will stay focused on the frames. The repeated motif of the wine leaves, flowers, and crosses inside medallions has similarities with the frame of the Poulenc icon seen earlier. Again, in my opinion, the dating of the frames can be 18th century, but of course more data is needed. The next pair of icons with frames also comes from the Valadoros bequest. The first one is the Resurrection, and the second is the Virgin of Tenderness. The icon of the Resurrection is dated at the end of the 17th century, and it has the signature of the artist Ilias Moschos. The size of the icon of the frame is 67 by 56.5 centimeters. The cassetta frame is decorated with pierced floral motifs and scrolls with 4 acanthus leaves on the corners. The specific type of frame is called a reverse frame, and it's typical of the area of Rome and possibly. Based on these comparisons, the date can be placed around the 18th century. The same can apply for the Virgin of Tenderness. Although the acanthus leaves are not so stylized, they're more crude, and so the frame can be dated in the 19th century. Possibly an effort was made to imitate the decoration of the background of the icon, but with no success. The following 2 icons are very interesting for the purpose of this presentation. One is depicting St. John the Baptist, and the other the allegory of the Holy Communion. The allegory of the Holy Communion was acquired by Antonis Benakis in 1923. The painter follows the iconography of Michail Damaskinos, while the signature of Emmanuel Janes is a later addition. It is dated at the second half of the 17th century, and the size of the frame is 77.7 by 66.5 centimeters. The icon of St. John, on the other hand, is dated in the 18th century, and it was donated to the Benaki Museum in 1988 by the Valianos brothers. Fortunately, I don't have the measurements of this frame. The important thing is that when both icons were acquired by the museum, there was no documentation whether they had a frame. Although we came across a similar case with a frame of the Adoration of the Magi by El Greco, the lack of evidence or absence of it is not indicative whether both icons had frames. Today, they're both displayed at the permanent collection with the frames that you see on the screen. St. John the Baptist has a polychrome Sansovino frame of the 19th century, while the icon of the allegory of the Holy Communion has a cassetta frame of the late 18th century, decorated with pierced floral and acanthus leaves, while at the bottom edge, you can see it here, there is a small scene with a depiction of a dragon. In my opinion, they look better with frames. The last icon that we will see has a type of frame that's called tabernacle. And it's also part of the Valadoros bequest. It depicts St. George slaying the dragon, dated in the 18th century. The tabernacle frame has pierced carved floral decoration on the right and left bottom edges. There is a small angel here at the bottom, appearing amongst the floral decoration. On the top edge, there is the scene of the Virgin, the unfading rose, flanked by St. George and Demetrius. The two side edges are decorated with two pillars that of the Virgin, the two saints. There are traces of color, but with no further conservation, we cannot know for certain. I believe that this frame was made for this specific icon, and it was destined for private worship, judging from its size, 74 by 47.5 centimeters, as seen in some examples of early Italian paintings from the 16th century. In 2022, Danaithomaides presented a hybrid lecture at the President University with the title Icon Display in Renaissance Venice, focusing on the display of post-Byzantine icons in certain locations in a building or a household, connecting the location with a meaning aimed to be perceived by the viewer. Today, I have shown you a variety of different frames, and I hope I didn't make you more tired, from the collection of the Benaki Museum. Certainly with this presentation, new questions rise that would further the research on frames, I hope. All the comparisons made today were based on the published catalogues of major museums, such as the Metropolitan Museum of New York, the Victoria and Albert, and the National Gallery of London. The next step in our research is to study the technology of construction and the materials used in order to have a better understanding of the dating of the frames, their origins, and the relationship between the icon and the frame. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mara, for presenting such interesting material, and one that we usually, we don't give the attention it deserves.
You disregard it.
We shouldn't, and you showed that to us.
Thank you.
If Elena is not here, I don't know, Paschalis, if you know something more, we can pass to the last one.
She's not here as well, so we can have a 5 minutes discussion, a short discussion about the two papers, and then close, because we need to close the audience hall here in Venice due to the reasons of security. So we need to close in 10 minutes time.
Okay, then just to ask if there are any questions about the paper of Maria Xanariou about the places and time in the illustration of Italian maps in Isolaria from the Philopoulos collection. Okay, and Mara Verikokou, the Italian wood-carved frames on post-Byzantine icons from the collection of the Benaki Museum. Any questions? Also, if something comes to mind, you can always email the authors directly and get more material from them. So back to you, Paschalis, for the closing.
Well, thank you very much, Nikos, for being with us and for being the chair in 2 sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much all the speakers of our first day, and see you tomorrow at 9:30 Venice time. Thank you all. Good night.
Buonanotte.
Buonanotte, Maria. Grazie.
Thank you. Bye.